Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm, and you are watching What If Fem-Naruto accidentally traveled back in time and was saved by Madara. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Now, wasting no more time, let's start the story.
When the Senju finally called for a retreat, Madara sighed. It had been over an hour since he had started killing and fighting. He looked back at the route he had been running on during the battle, which began in a remote clearing before abruptly shifting in the direction of one of the civilian villages, which was ensnared in the bloody path of death. I feel sorry for you, but that was typical of the time. All of our talk about creating our own village seems like a pipe dream, Madara thought. After all, this was a time of war, and the only people who survived and held power were the powerful. The elder Uchiha turned to face his younger brother and said, Madara. We will return to the compound now. He was a few inches shorter than him and wearing black armor that was smeared with dry blood and their clan's emblem, the Uchiwa. The younger Uchiha's eyes were haunted, despite a slight smile on his pallid face. Since he turned 7 years old, a 10-year-old boy has been compelled to kill. I will do everything in my power to protect my younger brother, Madara thought. He would be dead before he lost his brother, Izuna, as he had already lost 2 brothers. HN, was Madara's grunt in reply, and he and his younger brother turned back toward their house. They moved slowly, but because they were still on the battlefield, their backs were straight and a little tense. He scanned the remains of his kinsmen with his onyx eyes. Some were injured and receiving support from those who could provide it. Others were sealing the bodies of their relatives into plain sealing scrolls, and a few fortunate people, like himself and his Ododo, were moving about with only minor wounds. Even though they might have prevailed in that battle, the Senju War was still going on. The elder Uchiha looked at his brother, who was walking a pace behind him and to his right, and said, Pity, this village was lost on our way to victory. He was troubled by his brother's dejected, gloomy expression as his gaze drifted to the ashes of the village. Nevertheless, he had nothing to say to console him. There were many weaklings in the civilian village. Their own weakness was to blame. They ought to have joined forces with a clan of shinobi. In that case, they might have lived. But even then, they had little chance of surviving. Senju and the Uchiha were engaged in combat. Since the 2 most powerful clans in Hai no Kuni only provide perhaps a few silver coins, no other clan would be foolish enough to step in and save a few civilians. Did you hear that? Izuna asked. Madara stood at attention because Izuna had better chakra control than he did, and his brother's acute senses were far superior. Abruptly, Izuna ran into the village's ruins to the left. He followed with his sword after making a tongue. Click. When he noticed his brother crouching next to a child, he slowed down. The child was younger than him, but still older than his brother, as he could tell. The child's long hair was so smeared with blood that he was unable to distinguish its color. Since it would undoubtedly die, he didn't give it another look. Izuna frowned at the tone of impassiveness and indifference. Leave it, Izuna. We have to prepare for the next battle with the Senju. Izuna argued, but she is still alive, as he turned to face his brother. It will. Madara began. She is a girl, Inoue. At least let us try to save her. She is still alive, said Izuna. Madara gave the younger child a narrowed look. It appeared that his brother had forgotten about the lack of medics in his clan. They would not squander their limited resources on a child, a civilian child, at that. Especially if it would not be of any use to the clan. Izuna, she has tons of burns and she's covered with her own blood. Her chances of survival are non-existent. She is a civilian and not a part of our clan. Think as a clan head's son for once and stop acting with this senseless sympathy. If you want to end her suffering, kill her. Madara's stare of indifference made Izuna when his brother looked at him like that. He detested it. He looked down from Madara's, biting his bottom lip in concern as he searched his mind for a way to save the girl. He waited for a response while keeping his eyes on the ground. Can we, at least, take her to a civilian village and let them try to save her? Please, Inoue. In Madara, TCH, clicked. Izuna raised his face so quickly that Madara feared he might break his neck. Go to the compound. I will take her. I'm the fastest between us after all, Madara murmured. Izuna's eyes instantly brightened, and Madara's lips briefly turned up in response to the smile. Izuna gave a nod before running off to join the rest of their family. Madara put his impassive mask back on his face after sensing that his brother was out of his range. The girl, he thought, her breathing was labored and shallow. There was no question in his mind that she would die. With an either reality that even startled him, he knelt down and lifted her. He should not have been gentle, he was a warrior. Her light weight surprised the Year-old child warrior. Gently adjusting his grip, he dashed in the direction of the nearest village he could detect. Madara scowled inwardly at the villager who shunned him because he was afraid of him. Madara curtly inquired, "Where is the healer of this village?" Despite being a few years older than him, the villager was trembling in terror. "Civilians," he sneered, glaring at the man who was awaiting a response. However, he waited with a patience that was not characteristic of him until the man pointed in the direction of what he believed to be the healer. His aura was reeking of death and war, and his sudden appearance with a soon-to-be corpse made him quite the intimidating figure. Madara had not indicated that he had arrived peacefully. His presence in the village's streets caused the other residents to quickly flee from him in order to make room for the ninja, who appeared to kill them without hesitation. With the authority that came from being the heir to the powerful and proud Uchiha clan, he arrived at a hut and called clearly for whoever was inside to come and present themselves to him. He nodded his head in gratitude as an elderly woman emerged calmly and fearlessly, then threw the girl into her arms. He departed for his house after saying, "It is your responsibility now. Heal it or leave it to its death. The choice is yours, woman." He failed to notice the girl's eyes, which were startlingly blue when they opened, then widened with shock, then hatred, then loathsomeness, and finally confusion, before rolling backwards into her head again as she collapsed back into unconsciousness. She started and ran. She gasped in agony because her muscles were sore and her breathing was labored. She looked at the elderly woman who gently pushed her back toward the bed and said, "Lay down, child, you are not healed yet." The wrinkles on the woman's hands and face caught her weary gaze. The woman's features and gray hair indicated that she was well past her adolescent years. The elderly woman began wiping her face with a moist cloth. She exhaled blissfully before slowly moving her eyes in response to the woman's tender touches. She did so after saying, "Sleep, child, and once you wake again, we shall talk." She woke up frightened the second time. The single vertical red eye and the light lavender eyes glared at her angrily. "Then right here, right now, I shall erase you all from existence." In an attempt to ignore those terrifying words, she tightly closed her eyes and put her trembling hand to her heart. Who was that? After she gradually calmed down, she thought. She moved her gaze around her surroundings. She was in a tiny room, sitting on a futon. The room featured a door leading to the outside, a small window, a few necessities, and tatami mat flooring. As her hand moved to her thigh to retrieve her weapons, she realized the room wasn't familiar and froze when she realized her pouch wasn't there. When she looked at herself, she realized that these weren't even her clothes. The hell? She thought as she searched the room for her clothes and weaponry pouch but couldn't find either. She muttered to herself, "Calm down, Naruto," as she looked back at her attire. She was dressed in a white yukata and its juban, or undergarment. Her entire body was covered in medical bandages and herbs, but she didn't have any white bandages around her breasts because her skin was a shade of pink. Actually, that informed her of two things. First of all, she wasn't a prisoner because no one was watching over her while she was being cured, and second, she wasn't in a hospital. She continued to wonder about other things in the room because she was dressed in a yukata rather than a hospital gown. Why was the room not equipped with a fan or even a light switch to cool it down? Before closing her eyes and attempting to recall how she got there, Naruto carefully moved her body into a meditation pose. She walked slowly until she arrived at Kurama's sealed cell after opening her eyes to the all-too-familiar sight of a sewer. Naruto blinked her eyes slowly 3 times while standing in front of the gate. "Ah!" she exclaimed as she ran in circles in front of the empty cell. She would be killed by Tsunade. Chan for losing Kurama. She coughed after a short while to get rid of her now. Sore throat. She tried to persuade herself, saying, "Right, so Kurama is no longer in my seal. No worries, I will survive somehow," before entering the space that had been Kurama's cell and making her way to her memory chamber. When she opened the door, she was met with total chaos. She grimaced as she recalled how the young Yamanaka once had beaten her life, telling her that her mind was chaotic and that, as the best friend of a Konoha clan that specialized in mind techniques in her heir, she would make sure to give her regular check-ups of her memory chamber. "I should clean this place from time to time or Ino will kick my butt," she said. "I don't mind ninjin, at least then I'd finally have a quiet place to take a nap for once," she complained, recalling the time she had visited her mind. Scape and demanded that the fuzzball not attack her friend. "Try living in your mind for a day and you would know what I'm talking about," she said. As she entered the room, she thought, "Idiot fox." As she attempted to arrange them and determine her location and how she got there, memory after memory viciously attacked her. She watched herself fighting in the war and was horrified. How she let Obito and Madara win Neji. how Madara sealed the demon fox into the Jubi and tore Kurama away from her. After she died, she met the Rakudo Sennin, who revealed that she was the reincarnation of his son. They battled and defeated Madara, only to lose badly to Kagaya. She was so badly burned that her entire body was wrapped in bandages. As she missed her step and watched the fire ruthlessly engulf her body, she was aware of that. She wouldn't be here today if it weren't for the old geezer's yang seal. Then right here, right now, I shall erase you all from existence. Everything abruptly turned dark, causing her to awaken and gaze at the 3 Sharingan books spinning slowly and idly without any concern. Uchiha Madara was looking directly at her with his, "I'm a Uchiha and you are beneath me," gaze. She became aware that the Uchiha scum was handing her to someone when she did this. "They've passed away. I've failed. In this Genjutsu dream world, I am by myself." After that, she sobbed by herself in her memory chamber before pausing to reflect and gaze at the memories that were still there. But, as she wiped away her tears, she thought, something is wrong. Naruto recalled Madara giving her to an old woman as he sat there. She narrowed her eyes and thought, there's something wrong with this scene. He initiated that foolish Red Moon scheme, so he is to blame for this. He was the reason they all perished. She shook off that evil and malevolent thought and returned her attention to the Uchiha head in the frame. As she gazed at the Uchiha's expressionless face in the scene from her memory, she muttered, "He looks younger, and didn't he have 3 eyes back during that battle? And why did he hand me over to that woman to be healed instead of having me killed? Why is this bastard in my dream world? I don't want to see him of all people. I want nothing more than to kill him and rip him apart," she said in disgust after having another thought while gazing at the Uchiha's face. She broke out of her meditative trance with that outburst and walked slowly, her muscles a little sore, to the door of the room. A room brimming with dried herbs greeted her as she peered just past the door frame. Her keen sense of smell was assaulted by the strong scent of the herb, but she quickly adapted and moved deeper into the room to meet her ward, or, perhaps more accurately, her guardian, after Lord Madara kindly dropped her off there to receive healing, or abandoned her for dead. She wondered, why doesn't she use an electric mixer or blender? When she discovered the elderly woman she had seen a few moments earlier, or was that days ago, grinding some herbs between 2 granite stone plates. Adding the idea to her ask later mental memo. The old woman turned to her and smiled kindly, reminding her of the 3rd Hokage. "Gigi Chan. Ah, I see that you are finally awake, young lady. It is rather fortunate that you survived those nasty burns. I really thought that I wouldn't be able to save you," she said. She scratched her head as her cheeks began to flush a little. "I'm a quick healer, thank you, Ba Chan." Nay, Ba Chan, where am I exactly? And where are my clothes? Not that I don't like this yukata, which I'm grateful for," Naruto asked. "Your clothes, sadly, were burned. I couldn't save them. They were made from unknown material and they were basically scraps that I couldn't repair," spoke the older woman, who had laughed heartily before explaining, "I am not offended, young lady." "Oh," she said, holding her yukata sleeve in her bandaged hand as though it were her orange jacket. "Arrow. Kyofu, the Gamma Sennin, a self-described super pervert with no equal," she recalled. For her, he had purchased that jumpsuit. She muttered, "It's okay," and then turned, her phony smile fixed on her face. The older lady saw right through it and continued to clarify for Naruto, "You are currently in Matsumoto Village, a civilian village, that has a nice merchant district along with some warehouses and a ryokan inn. You were brought here by one of the noble ninja, who I presume saved you from the battle that crossed into Nagana Village. That village is no more thanks to the battle. It seems that you are the only survivor. You were unconscious for nearly 2 weeks." Naruto concealed her internal shock by staring straight ahead. Matsumoto. She began to panic inwardly because she didn't know the names of those 2 villages, Nagano. For 3 years, she traveled around the elemental nations with the Gamma Sennin, who made sure to visit every village. He always said that a ninja should become familiar with their surroundings, which was actually his method of visiting brothels and bathhouses and connecting with the informants in his spy network, all of whom she had encountered because she was his legacy and he was giving her control of it. After all, information is the most powerful thing there is. None of those villages have ever crossed my path. As she stood there still, Naruto mused to herself. The elderly woman gave her time to process what she had just said. She believed that the young girl, who was perhaps 12 or 13 years old, was grieving the loss of everything she had known. She had discovered that she was the only survivor of her village after waking up with injuries that she was certain were excruciating. Unfortunately, Nagano's mountainous suppliers provided her with some of her best herbs. Well, She may need to ask a girl to get them for her right away. The healer waited for the young blonde to respond before saying, "Now, young lady, how about you tell me your name before we get something in that belly of yours?" That girl's hair color was unlike anything she had ever seen. The majority of people in these areas had brown or black hair. Not many people had any kind of hair color. Even the blonde hair of some senju was not as colorful and beautiful as this young girl's. She had never seen anyone with such beautiful blue eyes. In fact, she was reminded of a clear blue sky by that soothing blue. When the child finally spoke, she snapped out of her reverie. "My name is Manatsu," the elderly woman said softly as she got up from her chair. "Manatsu, huh? Summer beauty. I like your name. How about we get you something to eat?" She pointed to the table in the center of the room and said, "Have a seat and I will prepare you something to eat." Naruto nodded slightly and turned cautiously to go to the small low table, only to stumble and fall to the ground. She lay on the ground, blinking, and the moment was dominated by a deafening silence. The elderly woman chuckled and said, "You are a clumsy one, aren't you, child?" Naruto's face was a little red, and she stayed on the ground for a while, frowning. She laughed awkwardly, then slowly put her bandaged hand on the floor and tried to get herself up, but she just froze. She gazed in bewilderment at the tiny hands encased in the cotton cloth scented with herbs. "They're smaller than I remember," she thought to herself as she cautiously examined her hands before hesitantly looking at the rest of her body. Compared to the 17-year-old body she recalled, it was smaller. She inhaled deeply and tried to slow her racing thoughts. With a worried tone, the elderly woman asked, "Is something wrong, my child? Did you agitate one of your wounds?" With an audible click, Naruto's mouth closed as she raked her hand across her face. As she searched her mind for a plausible explanation, she licked her lips and glanced up at her healer's worried face. It's just my body. Walking was a bit painful. It seems that I moved earlier than I should have." As Naruto wrapped her aching arm around the healer's neck, the elderly woman gently assisted him in standing up by placing her sturdy arm around his thin waist. "Ah, I see. I was surprised that you managed to leave your room to come here. But it seems that you are still not yet healed enough to take on longer distances," the woman said. Naruto saw that she was unable to walk without tripping as they slowly made their way to her seat. As though her legs couldn't receive the proper instructions from her mind, which knew how to walk. It seemed as though her mind was calculating the incorrect distances for each step, making them all much too long for her tiny legs to complete. After carefully placing Naruto on a tiny pillow in front of the dining table, the healer returned to the kitchen to finish preparing the meal. Naruto closed her eyes and let out a frustrated sigh. "What am I doing wrong?" She raised her tiny hands to her face and examined them again before asking the question. "Why am I still not healed? Normally, by now, I would be jumping through the trees like nothing happened," she thought anxiously as she examined her red and sensitive skin. It was difficult for her to move because of her pain. Everything ached as though millions of Haku's senbon had struck her all over. Her stellar healing record, of which she was extremely proud, was now utterly destroyed. "Isn't that because Kurama isn't trapped inside me anymore?" she thought nervously, cocking her head to the left. She noticed the wooden bowl of rice being set in front of her when she heard a tiny click. After leaving, the older woman came back with a plate of steamed fish. Naruto looked at everything on the table in front of her. The water cup, chopsticks, bowls, plates, and even the spoon were all made of wood. It was odd that china, glass utensils weren't being used, but wood certainly had the advantage of retaining heat. The voice in the back of her mind cried out that something was wrong more and more as she considered it. Naruto muttered, "Itadakimasu," as she picked up her chopsticks. She was careful not to offend the elderly healer. She needed to exercise caution because Madara was the one who dropped her off. She had no idea that the elderly woman might be assigned to observe her in order to gather information. Since her caretaker was a civilian, she reasoned that she should also act like one in the hopes of averting suspicion. What could Madara possibly want from me in terms of information? He took Kurama already, she asked herself. But you do realize that I already defeated him with Sasuke? Naruto pondered, trying to make sense of her predicament. Am I trapped in that world of genjutsu? However, wasn't that dream world meant to be something I wanted? If that's the case, my ideal world would be one of world peace, my friends by my side, and me as the goddamn Hokage. Instead, I find myself in this wooden shack with an elderly woman who is in agony due to burns that are taking a very long time to heal, and who is covered from head to toe in these ridiculous bandages. Naruto yelled in his head. I want to return home. I'd like to spend time with my friends. Please don't leave me here by myself. While absorbed in her thoughts, Naruto had not realized that she had finished her meal. or that the elderly woman had carried her back to her room, assisted her into the bed, and gently covered her with a blanket. Even the old healer's sorrowful eyes that lingered on the young girl before she was abandoned to mope in her misery had escaped her notice. Kyuji is a great name for a healer because it means, heal. If it weren't a name intended for men, the old woman would have loved it. When her father found out that his wife was expecting a girl, he promptly left her to fend for herself and their daughter, alone in the harsh world, because he had longed for a son to carry on the family name. This is a really cruel world, Kyuji sighed. She had spent nearly her entire life in that village. She spent the majority of it by herself because she lost her mother when she was only 4 summers old. It was probably a good thing that she didn't remember much about her mother because it made the loss of her less painful. She left the village to become a priestess when she was only 6 summers old. She had seen the monk arrange one of the villagers' funerals that devoted year. Being a lonely child who yearned for attention, she was greatly fascinated by the fact that everyone treated the monk with respect. Later on, she realized that being a priestess was more than just planning funerals and earning respect. Oh no, the work of a priestess was all about protecting life and finding the good in everything. They were the stewards of life and the children of the earth. The most significant lesson she had learned while working with the priests was that healing people was the best part of her job. She enjoyed seeing people's smiles after healing them or a loved one. She looked forward to waking up each day because she had saved lives. However, she was sighing while gazing at the blonde child under her supervision. She found out that the girl's name was Minatsu, and the two did not speak again. The child was sitting in the corner of her room, staring at her surroundings with vacant eyes and a detached demeanor, which was beginning to irritate her. She initially believed that leaving the child alone to grieve her losses would be acceptable, but after 2 more weeks went by in this manner, she began to question whether she should have done so. As a plan for returning the girl to the world of the living came to her, she nodded to herself. To bring this child back to life, she would give her chores, irritate her a little, take her for a walk, and allow her to interact with the villagers. She put the herbs she was going to grind back on the drying table and was ready to get up when a voice called urgently from her closed door. The voice of a man called urgently, "Kyuji. Healer. Sama, please help me." She rushed to the door as quickly as her 54-year-old body would allow, opened it, and then moved aside to let the man in. He had a pregnant woman in his arms who was gasping for air. She hurried the man toward the room where Minatsu was now, a room she typically used to heal her patients, and asked, "Jinosuke, what happened?" She hurriedly began to examine Izayoi, Jinosuke's wife, after assisting him in placing her on the futon. The terrified man begged anxiously, "Please save her healer. Sama." She fell in the kitchen after she spilled water by accident. Kyuji cursed when she saw blood leaking out of her womb along with the water. The man hurried out of the room after she told him to go outside and bring me some hot water. She scowled as she looked at the still, dazed girl in the room's corner. She called softly to the child, who was still in a daze, "Minatsu, help me here, please." She muttered a growl before approaching the still, depressed child. After saying a prayer of pardon, she raised her hand and quickly swung it down to the child's cheek. The child screamed, "Itai. What the hell, Oba? Chan?" Kyuji let out an inward sigh of relief before glaring down at the now irate girl and cutting her off right away. The old healer smiled slightly as she saw her ward glance worriedly at the hurting woman behind her before nodding and rushing to follow instructions. "I gave you enough time to work through whatever was depressing you, but this ends right now. Help me to save Izayoi-san. She is giving birth before her due date and I have no one to help me except for you. Now hurry and bring me some clean towels along with the herbs on top of the drying table." After many exhausting hours, Jinosuke looked worriedly at his wife, who was painfully squeezing his hand. Normally, he would wait outside for the delivery to be completed, but Kyuji Sama chose to stay by his wife's side because Izayoi's labor was premature and he only had one inexperienced helper. Izayoi had previously given birth to 2 healthy children, but the boys' births were very different from this one. Both were delivered within a few hours, and that fact alone caused him great concern. As he caressed his wife's hair and prayed for her safety, he muttered to himself, "It's my fault." His wife wouldn't be here yelling in agony if he hadn't been so lazy and just got the cup of water himself. Kyuji reassured, "All right, I see the baby's head. Give me a big push, Izayoi." After giving one final nod, Izayoi stripped and pushed as hard as she could. With a sigh of relief, Jinosuke heard a baby's loud cry. He had never seen her in the village before, but he watched as the elderly woman gave his newborn to her assistant. "You did well, my darling," he said softly into his wife's ear as he turned to face her while still petting her hair. His wife gave him a happy smile before abruptly letting out a deep, agonized groan. He snapped his head up and turned to face the healer as she swore to herself again. He glanced worriedly between his beloved and the healer, asking, "What is wrong?" He approached Kyuji slowly after noticing the healer's gloomy expression. He involuntarily inhaled and braced himself as she turned to face him with a dejected expression. The healer looked at the woman struggling on the futon and said, "I've done everything I can, but the bleeding won't stop. I'm so sorry." As his wife continued to groan in agony, Jinosuke's breath caught for a second before he snapped his head in her direction with a vacant expression. He begged the healer, who turned her face away in embarrassment, "Please. You have to do something. I can't lose her." Desperately holding his wife's hand, he bowed his head by her ear. His body trembled in sorrow as he said, "It's my fault. I'm so sorry, Izayoi." He was crying hot tears on her shoulder. Izayoi steadied herself and inhaled deeply and slowly. Jinosuke nodded his head shakily and turned mechanically to the blonde girl who had just finished cleaning his baby. "My child, let me hold my baby one last time." After examining the small life in her arms, Naruto approached the distraught couple holding their child in her arms. The baby's delicate, pale skin nearly blended in with the spotless white sheet she had used to swaddle it. As the girl approached his suffering wife, Jinosuke gave her a startled nod before putting the newest member of their family in her arms. The blonde girl's troubled face was marred by a sad smile as she said, "It's a boy." Izayoi brought their unnamed boy close to her face and gave her a grateful nod. Tears slowly trickled from the corners of her eyes as she pressed her lips to their baby boy's soft hair. "Hello, little one. I'm your mother. I wish I could be there for you, but it looks like I won't have that chance. I want you to listen to your father and don't worry, your brothers are a little rowdy, but they will take good care of you. Eat well, work hard, listen to your elders, and be polite." I want to." His wife's speech was interrupted when she felt another wave of pain rob her breath, and she let out in agony. For the first time in his life, Jinosuke felt absolutely powerless. Now, he was crying uncontrollably as he caressed his wife's hair and held the wriggling child in his arms, not wanting to ruin her final time with their son. His wife's body trembled in grief as she continued to cry uncontrollably. "We haven't chosen a name yet. I'm a horrible mother, aren't I, to leave you here alone?" she muttered hoarsely. "Izayoi-san," the weak woman said slowly as she turned her tear-streaked face to the blonde girl who was resolutely staring at her. Jinosuke's breath caught in his throat as he whipped his face in her direction as the girl said slowly, "I might have a way to heal you." The old healer said abruptly, "What?" Naruto turned to face Kyuji and looked her in the eye. Her glistening blue eyes never faltered for a second. "My friend taught me a healing jutsu, one that ninja use to seal light injuries so they won't get infected. I've never been good controlling my chakra, so I wasn't able to learn more, but I think that what I do know could help Izayoi-san," she said with a confident tone. "No," was Kyuji's firm response. "I've heard about ninja healing jutsu at the temple. They require great chakra control for even the most minor of techniques. If you tried one with no control, you might kill Izayoi-san. Besides, you aren't even healed yet yourself. To heal someone in Izayoi-san's situation, you will need to build up chakra first, which comes not only from your spiritual energy but also from your physical energy. The skin of your hands is still tender. Not only is it extremely dangerous for Izayoi but for you as well." Jinosuke observed with sorrowful eyes as the girl examined the bandaged hands resting in her lap. After that, she looked at his wife and then at their son, who was calmly staring at his mother as though he knew she was going to leave him, as though he was trying to ingrain the picture of her face in his mind. "I grew up without a mother's care. Even though I had our village's leader looking after me and close friends sharing their lives with me, nothing can dull the pain of growing up without a mother. Always wondering what she was like or if I looked like her. Did she like ramen as much as me, and the most painful of all, did she love me? I don't want their son to grow up like I had to. That is why Jinosuke-san, Izayoi-san, Ba-san, please let me try to heal Izayoi-san." The desperate girl spoke passionately, and there was a pause. Hesitantly, between strained grimaces, Jinosuke looked at his wife, who was holding their son. "Do it," he said plainly, his voice tinged with resolve. The elderly woman started to say, "Jinosuke," but was abruptly interrupted. "Kyuji. Healer. Sama, my wife will die. She will leave this world without naming our child or hearing his first word. At least with this girl, there might be a chance for her to survive. I couldn't bear to live the rest of my days thinking, what if the girl could have saved her and I didn't allow it? How would you have me carry that burden? How would I explain that decision to my sons? Jinosuke was arguing while looking at his wife, who was in agreement. Kyuji let out a deep sigh and slumped her shoulders in surrender. "Do it, child. But be careful." Jinosuke removed his son from his wife's arms and held her hand tenderly, attempting to maintain the sensation of her tiny, fragile fingers in his firm grip. He saw the girl shift a little and put her hand over his wife's stomach before she inhaled deeply. As she tightly closed her eyes, Jinosuke heard the girl murmur to herself, "Okay, first, calm down and summon your chakra to your hand and coat it uniformly." After a moment, the underside of her hand gradually turned a light green color. For a heartbreaking few moments, it flickered like a feeble fire in the wind before stabilizing as perspiration began to form on Naruto's delicate blonde brows. "Alright, now focus your chakra and guide it to link with your patient's chakra." "Oh. Okay." After that, what did Sakura say? "Oh yes, let your patient's chakra guide you to the problem." "Okay. Found it, T. Then summon more chakra and slowly feed it to the wound. To hasten the healing process, imagine that the chakra thread sewing the wound shut. Keep focus and guide the chakra until you feel no other problems." Naruto murmured to herself, her eyes focusing shut. As the girl went through the process, everyone in the room was careful to remain motionless. They watched anxiously as the girl tried to save Izuyoi's life. A smile slowly appeared on Kyuji's face as she cautiously advanced and checked her patient's bleeding. The healer quietly exclaimed, "That is enough, child," to the blonde girl who was now trembling beside her. Jinosuke held his breath until the elderly woman gave him a nod. As she moved aside to help Naruto, she reassured him, "She will survive." Jinosuke looked at his wife, who was breathing more easily now. As he saw the ethereal glow of childbirth now present in her form, he could already feel the vitality returning to her. Just like when she gave birth to their first two sons, the glow that had not been there just moments before was now evident in her. The weary man let out a satisfied sigh and then laughed a little as he pulled his wife into his free arm and gave her a tender hug. Their infant son began to coo as though he, too, knew that everything would be okay. He looked at the blonde girl who smiled at him and asked, "How can I ever repay you?" "I'm the one who should be thanking you," Naruto said, smirking slightly as she shook her head shyly. Jinosuke saw the girl's bleeding hands just as he was about to inquire what she meant. "Your hands?" called Izuyoi anxiously. Kyuji gave a playful huff before taking the young girl's hands and saying, "That's why I told you not to do this. Now look at the mess you've made." In response, Naruto smiled sheepishly at her. "Sorry, Obaa-chan," she said with a weary sigh before letting her hands drop into the older woman's grasp. After changing the girl's hand bandages, Kyuji reprimanded her, saying, "Do not, sorry, Mimanatsu. Baka and don't call me Obaa-chan. I've only recently turned 54. Kyuji then placed a lovely love tab on the back of the girl's head. "Keiichi." Jinosuke turned his attention back to his wife, who was still in his arms, from the lighthearted banter between the healer and her apprentice. Izuyoi gave her husband a loving smile and said, "Our boy's name will be Keiichi, the Blessed One. If Manatsu-chan weren't here, I wouldn't be with him now. Our child is truly blessed, my darling." He gave his baby boy a loving glance and nodded in agreement. With a warm smile, the proud father said, "Yes, Keiichi is a lovely name. He is a blessed boy indeed," looking down at his healthy son and glowing wife. Her name was now Manatsu. As the 14-year-old girl strolled through the streets of Matsumoto village, the villagers gave her smiles. Together with the elderly woman Kyuji, she was a bright, talkative child who assisted in healing the villagers. They could often see her stumbling and falling flat on her face while shopping, indicating that she was not the most graceful person. She would always get up with a pout and carry on with her journey, while most would just laugh and shake their heads. She always wore what appeared to be Miko's clothing, but she wore an orange hakama skirt that was split like a trouser in place of the typical red one. "I'm a bit clumsy, and if I wore the traditional hakama I wouldn't be able to finish my task of collecting herbs from the mountain, since I would most definitely keep tripping over the hem the entire time," she added, and orange is a badass color. When a villager asked her why she wore such clothing, as usual, Kyuji began their customary banter by giving her a good love tap on the back of her head for her language. She was actually a clumsy one. While strolling down the street, Naruto secured the top of her straw sack. The straw hat she was wearing cast a shadow over the top half of her face, hiding everything else except for a smile. Given that this was Sengoku Jidai, the time of war, she wore her hair in a bun to avoid drawing attention to herself while traveling. Given that she had golden hair, which was a very uncommon sight in this area, Any ninja who witnessed her mountaineering might assume she was a spy. Her teacher used to tell Naruto that she wasn't the sharpest kunai in the pouch, but even she was shocked to learn that she had traveled. After assisting Izayoi-san, Naruto began to question why she hadn't been taken to the hospital rather than Kyuji's house. However, he soon discovered that Kyuji was the village's sole healer and not merely a herb collector as he had initially believed. She had no idea what time she had entered, but she had a feeling it was long before Konoha was established. However, what was particularly noteworthy was that a much younger Madara brought her to Kyuji's. As the weeks went by, Naruto adapted to her new life since she was unable to find a way to return to her own time. In the same way that she loved third Hokage Jiji, the elderly man, she began to love Kyuji. Following the death of Kyuji's supplier in Nagano village, she also started to assist Kyuji with her hospital responsibilities by gathering the herbs and providing basic first aid to the patients as they arrived. Naruto helped out around the house by cooking, cleaning, and doing laundry when she wasn't working in the clinic. She soon realized that she wasn't constantly thinking about Akatsuki, world peace, or her future, or what a 14-year-old girl could accomplish in a society that didn't value women beyond raising children and taking care of the house. According to Madara's appearance and the scant history she could recall, Konoha wouldn't be established for a few more years at the very least. Selfishly, she wanted to put all of that behind her and concentrate on leading a typical life like everyone else. She was just a 14-year-old girl living her life and learning without the constant fear of death or the physical and mental strain of everyone's expectations. She was treated well in Matsumoto village. Because she assisted at the clinic alongside the elderly woman, the villagers showed her kindness. Apart from that, her upbeat demeanor was a welcome diversion, particularly given how frequently the ninja clans were at war. Why can't I just start over and forget everything? Naruto thought, but a voice in the back of her mind always objected. When she arrived at the clearing where she found the herbs Kyuji Chan had asked her to gather, Naruto hummed softly and argued to herself, "This is the new Nindo of Uzumaki Naruto." Fever had recently begun to spread throughout the village, and Kyuji asked her to gather yarrow herbs and elderflower, saying that both would be used to make teas that would help lower their fevers. This was crucial because if the fever wasn't lowered within 3 days, then let's hope it was just a common one. The blonde girl licked her lower lip as she forced her body to relax and continued to cut the nokojirizo or yarrow that Kyuji sent her to collect, instinctively turning to block a kunai that was aimed at her throat. Suddenly, her danger sense was screaming at her, and she tensed, narrowed her eyes, and strained her senses in an attempt to pinpoint the danger that was approaching her. Naruto stared in shock at the pearl-colored eyes that were intensely focused on her. Their opaque gaze hauntingly reminded her of Hinata. "You're not an ordinary citizen. Which clan are you a member of?" her opponent demanded in a neutral tone and with fictitious authority. "I mean you no harm and I am no ninja," Naruto replied in a tone that was cautious but appropriate. "These eyes can see everything," the Hyuga said, raising an eyebrow in derision. "Your chakra pools are significantly larger than those of a civilian, indicating that you have at least received ninja training. Now, respond to my query before I murder you." As she recalled her stoic friend, Naruto mentally cursed. Neji once said something like that. Those all-seeing eyes were always troublesome, she thought, before slowly explaining herself. "I'm a civilian. I've received some training so that I can work as a healer for my village. My village leader once saved a ninja, and as a thank you, she taught me how to use chakra. My chakra pools are so big because of this. I only came here to gather some much needed herbs in the hopes of curing the fever that has recently afflicted my village, so please don't hurt me." In an attempt to learn more about the enigmatic girl, the Hyuga gazed at her for a moment before withdrawing his kunai from her neck and moving away from her. "What was the name of the ninja who trained you?" "Haruno Sakura," Naruto said respectfully and with a hint of pain when he asked, and Naruto sighed inwardly in relief. The Hyuga casually stated, "I've never heard of the Haruno clan," with a hint of mistrust in his eyes that he likely believed he had completely hidden. However, Naruto lived with Neji, the Neji, who was so skilled at using the Hyuga poker face that only his teammates, his close family, and herself could read his facial expressions. As a result, Naruto chose to make fun of the poor Hyuga boy in front of her. A merchant civilian family is called Haruno. With a hint of humor in her voice, Naruto explained. Sakura is a second-generation ninja who chose to become one in order to defend our village. Naruto glared at the Hyuga after he gave him a degrading snort. Now, where is this powerful Haruno? Because of her overbearing grip, Naruto held her knife with both of her trembling hands and lowered her head to her lap in response to the haughty tone. Naruto muttered. She died along with the rest of the villagers, while she struggled to control her feelings. The Hyuga grinned and said, "That is to be expected from a civilian playing a ninja. The thought of it is truly laughable." Then, with a knife pressed to his neck, he found his face pressed into the ground. Fast, he thought, his eyes wide, all traces of arrogance gone, as he stared at the cold, frozen blue eyes that had been half hidden under the straw hat, fear radiating through his body like nothing he had ever experienced. Sakura was far more formidable than any ninja you could ever hope to be. She lost her life defending our village against Uchiha, that jerk. I would therefore keep my mouth shut and treat her with respect if I were you. Normally, he would have struck her with a simple juken palm to her bare, unprotected chest by now, but the girl's icy gaze took his breath away and paralyzed his body almost as if she overpowered his will to move. She was leagues ahead of me, and here I am one step away from killing you, Naruto declared coldly and unconcernedly, almost as if she were just discussing the weather. Her tone of voice hadn't changed, and there was no indication that she was planning to kill him. After a long moment, the girl stood up and backed away from him, leaving her back uncovered as though he had never bothered her in the first place, but the Hyuga didn't dare attack her. He sat down and continued to watch her, and he could tell that she was a sleeping tigress who was prepared to attack if necessary by the way she cut the herbs and skillfully put them in her straw bag. She was a good scout, disguising herself as a civilian, but if he hadn't had the Byakugan to see her chakra reserves and she hadn't attacked him just now, he wouldn't have a second thought that she was a worthless, harmless woman. When the fever subsided and a red, painful rash appeared on the villager's skin, Naruto sighed with exhaustion. Kyuji had never seen anything like this disease, so she decided to treat each symptom one at a time. Naruto felt useless. If she were Sakura, she would have already figured out what the illness was and how to cure it. She had gone back to the forest to look for herbs to ease their pain when she had an epiphany. I may not know what this sickness is, but someone else might know. The Hyuga boy, she thought, straining her senses to try to locate him, since his aura was always at the edge of her sensory range whenever she entered the forest. Perhaps if she asked him nicely, he would introduce her to one of their Iryo.nin, since the Hyuga were known for their prefect chakra control and their Byakugan could help them check for internal injuries. They were the prefect clan for healing. A moment went by, and Naruto moaned when she was unable to sense him. Gosh. He chooses not to come the day I need his assistance. I wish that Tsunade Chan was here or even just a way to connect her. Naruto screamed, slamming her fist into the ground in rage. She took a deep breath and sat on her back to come up with another idea, recalling the moment arrow. Kyofu used Gamakichi to send her a massage. Gamakichi! Naruto exclaimed as she jumped to her feet. Maybe if she could summon Gamakichi, he might be able to contact the slugs. They were known to be the best healers, so surely they might know something about this illness. After all, they managed to keep almost everyone safe during Pain's attack on Konoha. Yosh! With an enthusiastic cheer, Naruto began to go through the seals of the summoning hand after biting her thumb. Dog, boar, monkey, bird, and sheep. Jutsu no Kachiyose. When Naruto yelled, a huge cloud of smoke suddenly engulfed the area and departed the forest, leaving Naruto alone. Naruto's expelled smile gradually turned into a frown as she blinked twice. When she looked around, she saw that neither Gamakichi nor the Nagano forest were in front of her. Rather, she was standing in a hazy area that brought back memories of her battle with Kirigakure no Kijin, Momochi Zabuza. Her eyes straining to see through the fog, she flung herself into a fighting stand. The shadow abruptly changed before returning to its initial state as she abruptly turned her head to the left. She called out in a courageous voice, "Come out! I know that you are in there," and she congratulated herself in her head for maintaining her composure. If the enemy believed she was afraid, that would not be good for her. From her right, she heard someone say, "Ninjin, it has been 10,000 years since I last saw one in our land." She abruptly turned to face the misty area as the fog lifted, allowing a large orange fox with 5 tails to approach her rather languidly from behind. He stepped forward and stood tall before her. He will love playing with her, it said, bearding its fangs in a playful manner. As the blonde child in front of him trembled and gazed at him with wide eyes, the enormous kitsune laughed. He lowered his front portion of his body, prepared to lunge at the human, but he froze when the girl smothered him in a bone-crushing embrace. Oh, how he loved inciting fear in his prayers. Ah, who is the cute big fluffy fox? Yes, you are. You smugly orange big outgrown kitsune. I told Kurama that orange is the pest color, but he refused, saying that his fur was red, not orange. But you, my cute handsome fox. You are the most gorgeous fox I have ever seen. And your fur is so soft. Gosh, I bet that Kurama is jealous from your soft fur. I can cuddle against your fur all day. Naruto giggled as he stroked the lovely fur. The Gobi fox didn't know whether to puff his chest with pride because she had a nice taste for attractive fur, which he was so proud of, or to devour the human who dared to call him cute and touch his person without his consent. He was attractive, after all, and he didn't hesitate to accept praise. He stood there for a moment, cuddling with this strange woman. If it weren't for the unexpected snicker he heard behind him, he would have left her. He pushed the girl while coughing to hide his irritation. He turned his gaze away from her to glare at the four-tailed white fox who chose to make his rather annoying appearance known when she pouted at him. Orange Fox growled angrily at the century younger kid, saying, "What was that talk about killing the intruder a moment ago? Here I come to check on you only to see you becoming a cuddly teddy bear, nay, Baka Yoko." After growling at the white four-tailed fox, the orange Yoko smirked angrily and said, "After all, if it weren't for us Yoko, intruders would have wandered in our land, seeing how you Zenko or love peace kits who can heal but not kill." The dark eyes of the white-haired fox glowed with rage, and it snarled, "At least if it wasn't for us, the human would keep thinking that we are devil tricky mischievous malicious creatures rather than messengers of Inari. After all, it is all that pathetic Kyubi no Yoko fault that many of our kind were killed while they were wounding on the outside world." Growling and threatening to kill without hesitation, the two foxes circled each other to assess each other. The 14-year-old girl standing between them had a slight cough before they could both jump on each other's throat. The two kitsune looked at the girl for a moment before turning back to look at one another. "Anyo, can somebody tell me where am I, and how can I go to Mount Myoboku? And why you want to get into each other's throat?" they asked. The white fox turned to look at Naruto with a steady, blank stare before saying, "Ninjin, follow us and your fate for intruding in our land will be decided by our elder." After taking a deep breath, Naruto nodded. She strained to keep up with the two foxes' rapid paces as she followed them. The three eventually arrived at a massive castle with statues of foxes all over it. The statues ranged in number from 1 to 8 tails. Naruto's hand slowly touched her abdomen, recalling the seal that once held her life companion, and she thought of Kurama with a sorrowful expression as she recalled the 9-tailed fox. As she walked between the two tall kitsune who were watching her, she noticed a variety of foxes, some with orange fur and others with white fur, yipping excitedly. She saw that the two stood on either side of the palace and never walked next to one another. At last, they arrived at a vast room with the two foxes standing on either side. The orange fox was on her right, and the white foxes were on her left. She is unnerved by the varying degrees of wonder, loathing, humor, and indifference with which they all stared. All raise for the elder, Shi no Kitsune. Naruto observed that when an 8-tailed silver fox entered the room, the foxes rose from their seats and bowed. The fox gathered around a massive chair that resembled a throne and made her think of a Japanese courtroom. Given that she was in what appeared to be a courtroom, she saw the silver fox's golden eyes gaze into hers as though it were evaluating her soul. The sensation of being judged bothered her. She had spent her early years under scrutiny, so she literally shielded herself by wearing a mask of joy and boyish bravado. She kept her eyes fixed on what appeared to be the leader. Come on, she wasn't scared. The 8-tailed fox is 10 times less frightening than Kagaya, Jubi, and Kurama, whom she has encountered. She, the Kitsune clan's current elder, gazed at the blonde girl before her. Unlike the last human she had encountered, the girl was not trembling with fear. In fact, her dazzlingly clear eyes captivated She as she looked directly into them. Given that it was alive and had a depth of honesty that shocked She, such a rich color ought to be prohibited for humans. The Rakudo Sennin, the Samsara Eye, the barrier of Rinnegan's godly eyes, was the last upright person she encountered. However, Otsutsuki Hagoromo is the rabbit goddess' son. He was not so much a human as a god. There was something wrong with the child. She appeared to have lived longer than she actually did, based on something in her eyes. There was wisdom in her eyes that a child shouldn't see. The child was a mystery, and she, who is a wise child, wanted nothing more than to get to know this girl. She is amazed by this since she never imagined that anything could ever make her feel less bored. Sora-kun, why did you bring this intruder to our presence rather than kill it? She asked in a rather playful tone as she turned her attention to the Gobi orange Yoko. We thought that you had said that it won't take a minute to crush it between your magnificent fangs. Between his magnificent fangs, crushed. It makes sense why Kurama continued to threaten. Naruto glanced at the Gobi fox, whom she now called Sora, out of the corner of her eye and thought, it seems to run into the family. He was cute, in her opinion. Kitsune turned away in embarrassment, causing the white foxes inside the court to snicker. Naruto frowns as he observes the foxes' color-based separation from one another. That made her think of the Hyuga clan somehow. Sora uttered the words, "Some circumstances prevented me from doing so, Sama," with discomfort. The white Kitsune voice on Naruto's left had a sarcastic tone as it said, "Ho, do tell what circumstances that prevented the great mighty Sora no Yoko from killing one ninja and a woman at that." She saw Sora give the white Kitsune a low growl as he grinned triumphantly. Akira flinched slightly as Chi said, "Yes, Akira. Chan, do tell, as we remember a white four-tailed kid saying that she will make sure that Sora-kun won't let the intruder run away." Her eyes were sparkling. Since none of them spoke, she turned back to face Naruto, who looked at her without hesitation. "Well then, what is your name, Ninjin? It seems that our kin think of you highly to bring you in our presence within Takama.ga, Hara." Unbelieving that she was in the plane of high heaven, Naruto gazed at the elder. It was said to be the location where Kami reside. On the other hand, she battled Kaguya, who is believed to be a goddess and a demon, after meeting Kurama's purported father, who was a god. In any case, her life was never normal. She is, after all, the most erratic and knucklehead kunoichi in Konoha. In a tone that would have made Guy proud, Naruto said, "My name is Uzumaki Naruto, but I'm currently known by Manatsu." "It's nice to meet ya." She asked curiously, "Human known by two names, do tell why." The girl's loud announcement of her name was brash. But with her warm smile and sparkling eyes, she was kind of adorable. The girl looked at the ground now, and she saw how her smile wavered. With an apologetic smile, the girl muttered, "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," which piqued Chi's curiosity. With her most mocking smile, she said, "Oh, do tell, child, you would not know if I will believe you or not before trying. No." The child's lack of consideration for Chi is so disrespectful. She no longer bothers to count the number of centuries and millennia she has lived. She witnessed miracles that are now considered myths. After grinning at Chi, Naruto told her how she got here. How she was born in the future, years from now. She was the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yoko, which caused some of the Kitsune in attendance to gasp, and she battled against Kaguya and encountered the Rakudo Sennin. She listened passively to everything. She squinted at the girl who was talking non-stop. As she recalled the Kitsune who had 9 tails at the time of his creation, she thought, host of the Kyuubi. Even Chi didn't have that many tails at birth. Having 9 tails is an honor. It indicates that they are beings of the highest wisdom, which no one has attained yet. The peculiarity of the Kitsune clan is that they acquire a tail every 100 years, which symbolizes their strength, whether it be spiritual or physical. Chi was unable to pass on her 9th tail, no matter how long she lived. For example, Rakudo Sennin was the elder of the Kyuubi because none of them were able to reach their 9th tail when she created them. After all, the Kyuubi declined the role, claiming that he wasn't a typical fox like them and that his father had given him a mission to wait for the prophecy child who would bring the world together. She gazed at the girl who had completed retailing and how Manatsu had come to know her. Is this girl the child of prophecy? Does that imply that she was unable to prevent Kaguya from destroying the world? She squinted and gestured for the girl to come closer. She lowered her silver tail and allowed the black tip end to touch the girl's forehead, causing her to blink, after the girl had been a foot away. After closing her eyes for a while, she saw the girl's memories, which, much to her disgust, were real. She is the prophecy's girl. After pulling her tail back, she looked into this girl's bewildered eyes. Trying to erase the image of the woman's 3 eyes that demonstrated how inferior everyone is to her, she thought, Kaguya's power is scary. Since the girl lacked the strength to stop Kaguya, she is sent back in time, and Chi's job is to strengthen her. To enable her to protect herself and thwart attempts to release Kaguya from prison. Even though Chi may despise Otsutsuki Hagoromo for creating the Kyuubi, who prevented her from gaining her 9th tail due to his abnormal presence, she was too conceited to refuse how he saved the world by securing his mother's imprisonment. So Chi decided what to do. Chi smiled softly at the child who broke eye contact to frown at the ground and said, "We believe you, young Naru-chan. That is why the Kitsune clan will help you in your quest to save the world and allow you to sign our summon contract." Chi tortured the girl, knowing exactly what she was thinking because she had just seen her memory. "But I scared her, you Naru-chan." She made the stupid choice to start over and move on from her past. A girl will fail because she will not believe in a prophecy if she does not believe in destiny. Naruto refused to face the suffering by keeping her eyes fixed on the ground. She sighed and decided that eventually the girl would come to her for assistance. She smiled as her chakra glowed, and then the enormous silver fox body changed into a 20-something girl with long black hair pulled back in a ponytail and accessorized with traditional hairstyles. She looked like a princess because she was dressed in the most exquisite multi-layered, multicolored kimono. Teal colored eyeliner helped to define the girl's stunningly sharp, golden eyes. Naruto gazed in wonder at the girl with the two silver kitsune ear protruding from the top of her hair and 8 tails swaying languidly behind her. The girl's hypnotic swaying caused Naruto to momentarily lose his eyes before she gave a firm shake of her head. She smiled at the girl's antics and then extended her arms to embrace her. She observed that Naruto was hesitant to approach her, which she attributed to Naruto's recollection of no human physical contact. At first, Naruto's body was tense, but she relaxed and closed her eyes as soon as Chi began to run her long, thin fingers through her golden hair. Such a delicate creature, she thought, but once more, any human being who carries the fate of the future on their shoulder is destined to shatter. Even though she was attempting to shade everything and start over, which will ultimately result in her meeting her fate of rescuing the world from Kaguya's domination, she was amazed by the little Uzumaki's ability to stand. She gave the two foxes a playful look before they turned away from their leader's sly gaze. There, little Naru-chan. We Kitsune will always be there for you. After all, Kitsune is family-oriented summon clan. Even if some Yoko and Zenko forget that we are all at the end Kitsune and that we are family. After holding Chi for power, Naruto tried to lift her spirits by laughing at her. She gave Naruto a knowing glance that reassured her that she would not judge her but would offer her assistance to the best of her ability. Now we will continue our talk of your decision of your new life later, she said. She went on to say, you came here for a reason, no? Naruto nodded and added, I wanted to ask the slug summoned to help me heal the villagers, so I wanted him to call for Gamakichi. When the Zenko roared, making little Naruto jump in surprise, she smiled. A six-tailed white fox stepped out of his seat toward her, and the other white kitsune glared at Naruto. You idiot ninja, how dare you ask for another clan healing aid when you have us? We Zenko kitsune are 10 times better at healing thanks to Inari-sama. Naruto scowled. Sora laughed and then said, I like you kid. Even you are not blind to see how useless some white kitsune are when it comes to healing. Naruto started to perspire as Akira gave Sora a fierce glare. She smiled warmly at her clan and then at the blonde girl who nodded her attention before saying, Naru-chan, a little advice here. Never mention any other summon clan in any way saying that they are better. Especially the Toad clan, Weasel clan, Slug clan, Snake clan, the Eagle clan, the Crow clan, the Rat clan, the Salamander clan and the Phoenix clan, and any other clan. Because we Kitsune clan are the messenger of Inari, we are much better than anyone. Naruto was frightened by Chi's innocent grin that when she was crossed with. The Kitsune present applauded their leader, causing Naruto to perspire once more. She will always prioritize her Toad summons, for which she is incredibly grateful. Beside Naru-chan, Inari-sama is the god of ramen, was the final straw for Naruto. The world's greatest summon clan is the Kitsune clan. Among his clan's top scouts was Hyuga Takeshi. The clan head assigned scouting patrols to ensure the safety of their clan despite the fact that their compound was hidden and that no one had a better eye than them, not even the Sharingan. Takeshi's proficiency with his Byakugan made him one of the best rang sensors. After completing his routine patrol without any problems, he went in search of her. Her name was Minatsu. After the first confirmation, he continued to observe from a distance. He began testing her range of senses after noticing that she would get excited whenever he was near, but he was shocked to discover how long it was. She was incredibly skilled for someone who says she hasn't had any full training. Either she was lying, or she was naturally talented. As he observed her more closely, he came to the conclusion that, for want of a better term, her chakra control was terrible. When she suddenly attacked him back then, her chakra wasn't completely hidden. Unfortunately, it continued to pulse at various intervals, which is what drew him to her during his initial scout. Her chakra reserve was at their leader's bar, which terrified him. Given that she despises the Uchiha clan as much as his clan does, his clan might have a new foe or a useful ally if she had received actual ninja training. After sending chakra to his eyes to activate them, he began searching for the enormous reserves that resembled the sun. He scowled when he couldn't find her, which was strange because she was supposed to pick herbs today. A sudden chakra plus appeared close to his Rang's blind spot just as he was ready to turn off his Byakugan. He gave it his full attention and was shocked to see that it was Minatsu's signature. He narrowed his eyes and thought, she just showed up there out of nowhere. He hurried over to where she was and paused a few paces outside her ring, or so he believed, since she abruptly turned to face the side where he was hiding. As he observed her using his Byakugan, he saw that her chakra was flowing smoothly instead of erratically as it had 3 days prior to their last encounter. How did she quickly master chakra control? He pondered as he concluded that since she is aware of his presence, hiding won't help him. He approached her to see the broad smile on her face. HYA Stalker.san irritated him with the humor in her voice. However, he was a Hyuga, and Hyuga are renowned for their ability to control their emotions, which is also referred to as their poker face. As a result, he dismissed her impolite behavior by nodding his head in greeting. Before turning to face her village, she smiled and said, "You might want to stay away from my village, there is a contagious diseases spreading. We don't want to exterminate your precious clan now, do we?" Takeshi was unable to understand the question he had just asked before she disappeared from his view. "Why do you return to there? You might catch the illness too. It is better off if you leave before you lose your life." Takeshi saw the blonde 14-year-old girl turn to him with the sweetest smile he had ever seen, before he could even think about what he had just said. After saying, "Don't worry, Stalker.san. I won't die just yet," she put her straw hat on her head to conceal her face and left him there, perplexed. He concerned. Concerning her? Not possible. Time flows differently in Takama.ga. Hara. I as a leader can control its flow. I can make it go faster, or slower, but for the time being I'm keeping it at the same pace with the human plan. When she returned to the Nagano forest, Naruto vividly recalled what she had said. When she asked Shi if he could send her to her time, she replied that she could only control time within their territory and couldn't alter the flow of time outside of it. Instead of the chaotic state her chakra was in prior to being transported to Takama.ga. Hara, Naruto noticed that it was humming softly now. She struggled to summon her chakra when she attempted to heal Izayoi.san. She took a while to stabilize it, and after she told Akira about her attempt to heal without the right supervision, she was beaten. Healing jutsu need perfect chakra control. I'm amazed that you managed to heal that human with your lack of control. You have the dumbest good luck, Naru-chan. However, as our first summoner I will not be satisfied with less than perfection. And she did. Naruto returned to the village with a renewed sense of confidence in her healing skills. She was beaten into the best track by Akira. Although she wasn't yet Sakura, she is certain that she can cure whatever illness is plaguing the villagers after spending the equivalent of 6 months in the Fox's territory. She was even more eager to save lives because in the real world, only 3 hours had passed. Besides using her shadow clones for training, that is. Yes, that is exactly how awesome she is. To Akira's pride, Sora was disappointed to learn that Naruto actually needed Zenko's healing assistant instead of Yoko's powerful fighting skills. Naruto chose to live a civilian life, so she ignored his incessant complaining. "I'm not gonna run away and I never go back on my word, that is my ninja way." To put an end to such a thought, Naruto shook her head. She is making a fresh start and will put the past behind her. Given that Konoha won't be here for an unknown amount of time, she won't worry about his fate. Then why does she have a persistent worry in the back of her mind? Seeing how things seemed to get worse while she was away, she arrived in the village looking grim. As she hurried past the villagers who were now throwing up in the alleys, she arrived at Kyuji's hut, where some of them were fighting over who should get some herbs first and urged her to solve the issue. "You are the healer, are you not? You should do something. My kid got red and purple spots now. You said that it was just a fever few days ago. Rash. Do you have anything to heal rash? This is your fault. Whatever you gave me last time made my skin swollen." Naruto reasoned that this is how fear causes people to act irrationally as she pushed her way through the crowd to approach the elderly woman who was attempting to soothe the terrified, enraged crowd. Naruto yelled, "Enough!" after she had succeeded in confronting Kyuji. "Ba-chan." All eyes were on Naruto in disbelief, and she inhaled deeply. Even though she was a boisterous, carefree child, she didn't seem serious in this way. Calmly, Naruto remarked, "You can never understand someone if you don't share their pain." Here, Naruto turned to look sorrowfully at a woman holding her child as she looked away in shame. "I understand that you are afraid of death. I was at the door of death before Kyuji. Ba-chan healed me, so I know how you feel. There are 2 basic motivating forces: fear and love. You are afraid of death and losing your loved one for a disease. It must be painful to feel hopeless, to feel that you can't do anything to help your son. Your wife," said a man, looking away. Most people looked at them in shame, while others were upset that a young child could read them well. Or even to help yourself. But even so, you can't just shout at Kyuji. Chan. She is trying to help. She is not to be blamed for the disease as she is trying to figure out a way to heal, Naruto said, glaring at the crowd. Someone in the back had the gall to yell, so what, she is the village healer. It is her job to heal us, but whatever she did seems to make it worse. Which caused some of the crowd to yell in agreement. This disease is no one's fault but yours. Kyuji shivered behind Naruto as he snarled at the individuals in front of her. When Naruto said that someone had slapped her face, people yelled in rage. You are but a worthless woman, you don't belong here. How dare you to speak nonsense? If anyone is the cause of this curse then it is none other than you. It only came to our village after you have arrived. Naruto uttered the words, Akamabaroshi, to silence the crowd. What? The illness that you are having is called Akamabaroshi, It affected individuals typically develop symptoms including high fevers, shaking, chills, fatigue, headaches, vomiting, and general illness within the 2 days of the initial infection. The erythematous skin lesion enlarges rapidly and has a sharply demarcated raised edge. It appears as a red, swollen, warm, hardened and painful rash, similar in consistency to an orange peel. Naruto looked calmly at the man. Even though some of the words were unfamiliar to them, she saw that many people began to pay attention after realizing that the symptoms were what they were currently dealing with. Many people gasped when Naruto said, at the end, the infection will appear at the face, arms, fingers, legs, and toes, and then you will die. People began to avoid those who had already begun to get the rash out of concern that they might become infected. The same man who had slapped her yelled, you knew of this illness yet you were silent all this time. Which caused others to look at her suspiciously. The cause of this illness is insect bites. You were bitten before you started to feel ill, no? Naruto asked, letting out a sigh. A few people with rash nodded fearfully, remembering feeling a sting before they developed a fever. The man who was beginning to irritate her was silenced when Naruto yelled, insect bites. Are you mocking me, woman? The people of Nagano village are dead. Their bodies are not buried, no. None of you people. A sister civilian village that had connection to them went to there to help. Which I don't blame you, you would be stupid to go to a ninja battlefield. However, their bodies are rotting there in the open air attracting all sorts of animals and insects. The insects develop the illness which moved to your body that will kill if not healed. How I know about this illness is because I went back to the village. My dead friend was an Irio.nin. In the ruins of her house I found this. Naruto extracted a scroll resembling an ancient purse. The Fox clan is actually the source of it, but they won't be harmed by what they don't know. Given their presumption that she was the last person to survive in the village, she chose to use it as a backstory and a justification in case they began to question her. After all, a girl who was awkward and ignorant of healing would raise suspicions from anyone, especially if her caretaker, the village healer, was unaware of the illness that afflicted them. Returning to the topic at hand, Naruto said, this is a scroll that contains the cure of this illness, after displaying the scroll to them. The man Naruto was arguing with grabbed the scroll out of her hand and said, give it to me. He scowled at her after opening it and beginning to read. Naruto gritted her teeth and looked at the man who cruelly referred to her caretaker as Baba. It says that to cure aka Mabaroshi, the Irio.nin should give a soother from collection of herbs and then use their chakra to heal the illness. Kyuji. Baba, can you do it? She asked. She knew from his expensive clothes that he was a merchant. He made her think of Sasuke's haughtiness during the early days of Team 7. The man's demeanor made it obvious that he thought he was better than you. Kyuji's candid response, I can make the remedy, but I can't heal like those ninja do, destroyed everyone's hope. When someone shouted, how about we hire one of those ninja to heal us? The village leader appeared to respond, do you have money for that? I used ninja as an escort when I went to Kyoto, and they overtaxed me for a 3-day trip. How much do you think they will make us pay for healing the entire village? The merchant who was unkind to Naruto made a crude demand. Oyome, I heard that you used chakra to save Jinosuke's wife. You can heal us, right? Then do it and start with my family. After Naruto was overcome by the man's yell, a mummer. A hopeful one at that. Broke. She was undoubtedly here to heal them, and she would have done so without hesitation, but it was somewhat devastating to be pushed backward with sick people. Kyuji yelled, stop, for the first time since Naruto had met her. Everyone froze and turned to stare at her as she spoke in a loud, clear voice. People began to nod obediently, and Kyuji stared in distress. Manatsu. Chan doesn't have the right control to heal yet. She had injured her hands just to stop the bleeding of Izayoi.san. She won't be able to heal us, but she can try. We will die old. Baba. If she can heal us, then she will. It is the least she can do for housing her in our village, no? I have spent the time on the forest to perfect my control to save them. Don't worry, I won't get hurt and I won't let them die, Naruto muttered after placing a hand on her caregiver's shoulder. She then looked at the vendor and replied, I can do it. However, those who have rash will be healed first. I will heal the extreme cases and then I will move to the next. Those who are not infected will go to Nagako village and bury the corpses, because if we don't, then there is no guarantee that you won't get infection again and die. He was slashed when a fist struck his cheek, sending him crashing to the ground. Now you listen to me, woman. You will heal my family first or I will, he said. When it became clear that Naruto was the one who had punched the man, everyone fell silent. As she stalked closer to the merchant who was cradling his now red cheek, they made room for her. They chose not to cross the awkward short girl because they were astounded to even consider the power concealed in her diminutive frame. Never. Listen to me and listen well. I'm the one who can heal here. I don't care who you are, or how much better than the rest of us you think yourself are. If you got into my nerve, I will beat you. If your family members have rash, they will be healed first, if not they will wait. People who have rash have a huge chance of dying along with children, and thus I will heal them first. Now, either you help or scrum away, Datbeo. Naruto held her shoulder and massaged it while letting out a weary sigh. She has been healing the villagers for the majority of the day. The illness would develop much more quickly in children than in adults because they lacked sufficient immunity to it. The elders came next, and then the person with the rash because it was the last stage of the illness. Those who were in the early stages of the illness came last. Although it was a demanding job, some women in Kyuji assisted in creating a remedy to ease the pain before Naruto arrived to treat them. Other men arranged who would be healed first, assisted in carrying the patients closer to her, and so forth. After 6 months of training with Akira, she still had difficulties, so she made the decision to continue training. Kyuji abruptly appeared to stand next to Naruto, who had just healed the last one, and said, You did well, my child. Naruto was appreciative when she offered him a cup of tea. As she casually glanced at the blonde teenager out of the corner of her eye, she remarked, Those copies of yours shocked me slightly when I first saw them. Naruto responded with a slight smile, recalling the situation that made her need it. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu is a jutsu I seem to do well. It creates a solid copy of me that can think and act just like the original. Yeah, the monster fox would do that, but Naruto is different. I've acknowledged him as one of my excellent students. He may not be the hardest worker, and he is clumsy and no one accepts him, but he already knows what it is to feel pain inside your heart. He isn't the monster fox. He is a member of the Konohagakure. He's Naruto Uzumaki. Her motivation to remove her mask was Iruka's words. She hid behind a boy's mask to shield herself from the derisive treatment of the villagers. Imagine Iruka's reaction when she told him she was a girl at that time. It was hilarious. Though he didn't want her to get involved in the negative problems that kunoichi face, Iruka told her that a shinobi's life is much easier than a kunoichi's, given how the outside world looks at women with a depressing expression. Furthermore, once she gains the strength to defend herself, taking off her mask will be her ultimate practical joke on everyone. Iruka thought she was the coolest person ever after that. I never thought that you were a ninja. Kunoichi, Naruto corrected and then responded with, I failed to protect my village. They are no longer here, Ba-chan. That is why I wanted to bury my past life and start new. I wasn't strange enough to save them. Kyuji pointed to the final villager to leave the clearing where they were healing the people before they departed for their homes, saying, You would be foolish, Manatsu-chan. If you didn't use those jutsu, you wouldn't have been able to save them. Naruto turned to face the elderly woman who was also drinking some tea. My father abandoned me the moment I was born. My mother died no more after that. It is a hard life for a child at these times. Then what about for a little girl? Naruto said. The elderly woman gazed at the fire in the clearing and went on in a melancholy tone. I became a priestess to gain some respect, but I later realized that was not enough. It was selfish, and my mentor beat me to death for it. He told me that we priestess are the child of earth, and that we are here to guide people, preserve life, and show them that there is hope when they thought there was none. His words made me a healer. Hope is the feathered thing that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. Being a healer helped me save lives, but I was unable to save everyone, which is something that no human can do. Nevertheless, we can save as much as we can to create a better future. I can see that you were born for greatness. Brooding and dwelling on your failure is not your way of life. You are a girl who learns from her mistake and keeps moving forward. You claimed that you were not strong enough to save your village, but Manatsu-chan, nothing stops you from growing stronger to create a better future, right? Look at what you did today. You went back to the ruin of your village to find a cure for our disease, and then you trained to get a better control just to make it better. Naruto turned her attention to the fire licking into the forest. She recalled her friends' faces in the Fourth Ninja War as she considered what Kyuji had said. She lacked the strength to save the lives lost and to quickly defeat Madara prior to Kaguya's release. However, nothing can prevent her from growing stronger than she already was. Like a lightning strike in a clear sky, that realization hit her. As she thought, she abruptly stood up. Since she is still sealed in the moon, she can stop Kaguya. Since the Fourth Ninja War has not yet begun, she is able to prevent ninja from engaging in combat. Since she is present and Madara hasn't yet begun his Red Moon scheme, she can prevent him from murdering her friends. Since her friend is still alive, she can prevent their death. She can find the peace she promised Nagato and Ero. Kyofu, even though she might not be able to live with her friends and become a Hokage. Because she is in the past, she will break the cycle of hatred at its source. She has the power to improve her friends' futures. Naruto was so excited by the thought of what might happen that she gave the bewildered old healer a giddy hug. I'm not gonna run away and I never go back on my word, that is my ninja way. And instead of fleeing, Naruto embraced her nindo this time. Because you had better be ready for her Dabbao. She is Uzumaki Naruto. While napping between mounds of fur, Naruto reflected that 3 years had gone by. Following Chi's advice, she chose to unwind today. Following the aka Mabaroshi bio incident, she was asked to treat various ailments in nearby villages. She made a cage bunshin to stay in the real world while she trains in the Fox Dominion because she was afraid she might be taken to the clan wars before she was strong enough to defend herself. Akira frowned at Sora's arrogant expression when she chose to learn from Yoko this time. To get them off her back, she would switch between the two types of training. Although it was amusing at first, their excessive pride and jealousy of one another eventually began to annoy her. Thus, Naruto reasoned that she should start with the younger kids if she wanted to transform the elders of Kitsune and end their hostility. She began playing with the orange and white kits, occasionally chasing them, giving them praise when they performed well, and napping with them in a big pile, just like she is doing now. Although they are still not very nice, the older generation gradually began to accept one another. At last, they are able to have polite conversations without putting one another in a difficult situation. Baby step, was Naruto's mumble as she brushed her thin fingers through the fur of the white little fox that had chosen to sleep on her lap. When Ayoko gave a little whine, she laughed and scratched behind his ear, causing him to yip with delight. Naruto slept for a few hours before waking up. After stretching, she patted the heads of all the kitsunes on the sleeping pile. Time to go back, was her next statement after grinning. She located one of the Yoko's elders and requested that he give her back, which he did. At the base of Nagano's mountain, Naruto emerged. The water was rushing toward the ground as she approached a waterfall and gazed at it. She tried to wash the sleep from her face as she walked to the river. As soon as she saw someone nearby, she abruptly narrowed her eyes. She dipped her hands in the water and thought, Takeshi, but she quickly shook her head. A year ago, Takeshi ceased to steal and absorb her. She hadn't actually seen him in a few months. Something to check later, she thought, trying to find out who was, or, perhaps more accurately, who was watching her at the moment. Their ability to conceal their chakra was demonstrated to her by the fact that she was unable to detect it. Nevertheless, their intent was evident. Being Kurama's vessel taught her to feel their negative emotions. May God bless his soul wherever he is at the moment. She believed that there were 3 of them, with one being decisive, the other passive, and the final one being desperate. In any case, she will know what they want from them after speaking with them. Applying chakra to her voice, she hummed softly. As she cast her genjutsu and hummed a line that Sora took pride in teaching her, Naruto thought, Kaisei Kyoku no Genjutsu, Siren's Melody Illusion. Out of the 3, she saw 2 fall to the ground from tree branches. With the help of her voice, they slowly knelt down. She quickly materialized behind them and struck them in the face, rendering them unconscious. She swiveled her head in an attempt to detect the final enemy. She turned to the left out of sudden concern. Naruto said icily, Come out, I know that you are in there. She continued to stare at the now wary aura that gradually emerged from its hiding place. Sasuke? Naruto muttered as her eyes widened abruptly. Since it was an emergency, Izuna declared that he was on a mission and didn't wait for official approval from his brother or the Uchiha elders. After killing Senju Bitsuma, the leader of Senju, his father fell. The collective thought of all the Uchiha present on the battlefield was, at last, that bastard of a Senju is dead. As the Uchiha pushed them away, the Senju cried out for a retreat. Every Uchiha felt proud of the devastating blow to the Senju. It was only when his father, Uchiha Dojima, the head of their clan, fell to the ground. The moment that made Izuna's heart stop in terror was controlled by silence. Madara glared at his kin-men, who were standing there with nothing to do. "What are you waiting for? Start healing my father," he said. Izuna yelled, "Chichiyu," as he hurried to his father's side. The Iryo.nin, who were close to their father, began to heal him but stopped after a short while. Madara yelled, "Why did you stop?" And he jumped in terror. "Well, get me someone who can use a better jutsu. Sorry, Madara. Sama. However, Tajima. Dono is not responding to my technique." At that moment, Madara's Sharingan came to life. His 3 mature Sharingans swirled like a hurricane with worry and anger. The man winced when Madara gave him a glare. "I apologized, Madara. Sama, but I'm the best healer among our squad," he said. Izuna put his hand on his shoulder to take his full glare just as he was about to beat him senseless. "Anyway, I will bring a better healer. Take father to the compound and keep him stable until my return." Izuna said those final words before leaving for Matsumoto village. Finding out more about Gaseki no Kairio. Miracle Healer, was easy because the village was thriving. As one of his clan's best strategists, he kept an eye on everything that could help his clan win, including their medical capabilities, which paled in comparison to the Senju's highly regarded medical system. He proposed that they begin teaching a few of his clansmen how to heal using their chakra, similar to the Senju, since even he was not too conceited to acknowledge that his clan lacked healers. They were able to prevent warriors from dying from infections in minor wounds thanks to his suggestion. However, many of them died after suffering a potentially fatal wound. It's so unfortunate that he thought about employing a healer from outside their clan. The Senju will not defeat his clan in any way. He began to hear tales of a civilian using their chakra to treat internal wounds and broken bones. He wanted to do more research, but they were sucked into a battle that lasted until today. He entered the village with his 2 escorts, neither of whom he even knew their names, and used their Sharingan to locate the healer's hut, only to discover it deserted. He later discovered that their target occasionally spends a few hours in Nagano's forest after integrating another villager through his Sharingan. So they made their way there. At last, they discovered their target strolling through the forest. When he realized that their target was a she, he was astounded. Wearing Miko clothing, she left her back exposed as she made her way to the waterfall. Looking at the blonde ponytail hair swinging behind her back, he thought, foolish. He signaled to his teammates to encircle her and maintain eye contact. He looked at their target, who was now washing her face with the waterfall water, after they had nodded and departed. Izuna gazed at the lovely, fair face, which was now covered in water droplets. He thought desperately, this is the one who is going to save father. I hope she can save him. Simply close your eyes. The sun is setting. You'll be fine. Now, nobody can harm you, as dawn breaks. I'll be safe and sound, as will you. Izuna's eyes gradually began to relax as some of the tension in his poster began to evaporate. There was a tune that began to make him want to just relax and let everything go. He believed that if he could just relax and close his eyes, he could have everything. He felt secure and pain-free. However, something is false. Genjutsu. Izuna cut the effect by flaring his Sharingan. As he heard the slow hum lulling him to sleep, he moved his hiding spot. He squinted as he watched his 2 teammates make their way to the clearing before being knocked out cold when their target swiftly materialized behind them. Seeing that his Sharingan was unable to track down the woman, Izuna thought, fast. Upon noticing her standing close by from his purported escort, Izuna swore, "Come out, I know that you are in there." Izuna walked to the clearing, raising his hand in the global motion of I.Kim.in. Peace. Calm down, Izuna. You can trap her in your Sharingan Genjutsu and save those idiots. When he made contact with his Sharingan using the girl's blue eyes, Izuna thought, what a beautiful pair of azure eyes. Sasuke. The girl murmured, her eyes wide. After giving it a title, Izuna dismissed it as a result of his Genjutsu, Sakai o Yumi, Dream World. The girl narrowed her eyes and muttered, "You are not Sasuke. Who are you?" As he was ready to drop his hand and approach. How did she break free from his Genjutsu? Izuna didn't feel the typical chakra pulse of breaking one, so he stared wide-eyed. After calming down, Izuna said, "My name is Izuna. I came here in peace, with his most endearing smile. And I'm the ramen god. So, why were you and your goons staring at me? Weren't you thought not to peek a look at a woman? I swear that men are pervert by nature, the woman said, snorting rather unladylike instead of responding with the blush and kiosk squeeze that he usually receives. Izuna scowled as she spoke. Thank you very much, he is a well-mannered gentleman, Izuna said without missing a beat, slowly scratching the back of his head to give the impression of a silly child. I apologize if we offended you, but we came here requesting your medical skills to heal one of our own. I'm sorry that you felt threatened by our way, but please blame that to our ninja training. Oh, Izuna saw the healer put her hand on her hip and lift her delicate, fine eyebrow. What made the mighty Uchiha clan seeks the help of little poor old me? You would think that well-known clan would have the best medical staff to fight their long-life foe. Izuna's face became suspicious. How could she have known that I'm Uchiha? Your pink eye and the Uchiwa symbol on your armor is how I knew that you and your pals are Uchiha. Even if I'm a civilian doesn't mean that I will be arrogant to Shinobi famous clan's symbol. You know it is a civilian first rule, stranger danger, especially a ninja, and that is how I survived Izuna-san. But I'm not a stranger now, Manatsu-san. You know my name, no? Izuna index pouted as he scratched his cheek. Izuna chose to pretend to be a naive child, so he began to display his emotions on his face. Since they were all trained to cheat well, kill, and then walk in the funeral procession with tears in their pale faces, it's not like this civilian could read his deceit. And don't sell yourself short, Manatsu-san. You are the Kaseki no Kairio-sha. Best healer in the world. I came here to ask for your help to heal an acquaintance of mine. Our healers couldn't heal him. He will die, Manatsu-san. If we have good healers like you, many of our kin would be alive. Izuna smiled sorrowfully as he gazed at the earth. Although his feelings were sincere, he had to make them visible in order to persuade her. Izuna was cut when he abruptly clapped his hands in front of his chest and said, "Oh, I know, how about you work for us after you heal my associate?" Naruto continued. "I'm the healer of my village, Izuna-san. Please understand that I can't leave them," in an apologetic tone. Izuna clenched his teeth in his mind. He believed she would join them if he put on a silly, naive, and emotional front. Unfortunately, he can find a way to accomplish that in the future. His pathetic, pleading face was filled with worry as he said, "Oh, I see. But Manatsu-san. Please come with us. He will die without your help." Izuna scolded her in frustration, saying, "Bring him to here, Izuna-san, and I, but Manatsu-san. He will be damned to have it this way every second he spends with his father, who is dying. We can't move him according to the medic. Please, I beg you," Izuna said, sinking into his knees in the sand this time without lying and staring in desperation. For a brief moment, Izuna saw the blue-eyed healer gaze at him without emotion. Izuna was then informed by a distant glance that she was seeing right through him rather than seeing him, as though she was having an affair. Perhaps Sasuke was waiting for her. As his hand approached the hilt of his sword, he considered what would happen if she refused. Izuna knew that people perform at their best when they want to, not when they are afraid, but he could always make her. He is here pleading with this woman for that reason. And in order to keep his father safe, he will engage in heinous, degenerate activities. In contrast, Naruto was furious. This is the only time she thinks and plans for the future. While waiting for Konoha to be located, she decided to spend the rest of her life healing the residents of Matsumoto village. She will then kill Madara before he defected and call Kurama to battle the first Hokage in the Valley of the End. It was a straightforward plan of which she was extremely proud, but now she is witnessing its failure because of Sasuke's resemblance. What should she do now? The Uchiha clan values the person in need of healing so much that they dismount their powerful horse and plead with a civilian for assistance. She might be forced to stay and recuperate during their conflicts if she accompanied them, which could drastically alter the timeline and prevent Konoha from being established. What if Madara was the person she was asked to heal? If he passed away, she could bid Konoha farewell. Oh no, what ought she to do? Naruto thought in frustration and licked her bottom lip. However, what if it was an unknown individual and not Madara? Yes, she has that hope, correct? Naruto pondered. She saw Izuna's hand hovering over the hilt of his sword just before she rejected him once more. Her gaze shifted back to the crimson eyes that were anticipating her response. She senses his desperation and intention, which makes her want to assist him. When Sasuke had this expression, it was difficult to look at his likeness. It made her think of Sasuke when he was depressed enough to visit Orochimaru, the pedo. She felt like throwing up just thinking about Orochimaru. If you don't share someone's pain, you can never understand them. She will have Izuna on her back if she refused to assist him and the patient passed away. Although she is confident in her ability to defend herself, she is certain that the Uchiha clan will come to seek justice if he dies at her hands. Justice comes from vengeance, but that justice only breeds more vengeance. And the cycle of hatred will continue. Well, forget about it, Naruto is her. She is not the most astute kunai who makes plans in advance. She has always followed her instincts, and they are telling her to assist Izuna. She can always fight her way out of the Uchiha clan and, ideally, beat Madara mercilessly in the process. She turned to face Matsumoto after saying, Izuna-san, I will need to return to the village to get some supplies to heal your acquaintance. With the 3 Uchiha on her toe, she had reached for her hut. The 2 she had previously knocked were piercing the back of her head. Naruto grinned wryly as she sensed Izuna giving the 2 a pointed glare. Please stop glaring at my head, I will need it to heal your kin. As she was packing a few herbs into a scroll, one of the 2 asked abruptly, you can use seals. Yeah, was her quick response as she went around her home collecting a few weapons and medical supplies, which she then sealed in her wrist storage seal that was hidden beneath her sleeve. She knows they won't let her leave once she has healed their kin, so she will need it when she breaks out of the Uchiha compound later. She wore her backpack, which is now filled with scrolls, and her straw hat. She smiled softly and said, well, then, shall we go, gentlemen? Izuna nodded and proceeded to say, I'm sorry Manatsu-san, but we will have to put you into a genjutsu. It is just some security procedures that our clan follows when we bring stranger to our home. As they traveled between trees, Naruto pouted like a child while Izuna carried her in a peggy fashion. The genjutsu they had on her caused her senses to become confused. She considered protesting, but she decided against it after considering the Uchiha clan's free ride. She was more than 10 times heavier than normal due to her weight. Seal. Izuna must be courteous enough to refrain from complaining about her weight, or else he is accustomed to carrying heavy objects, which she wouldn't think a skinny boy could do. Meh, she doesn't care about that at all. Naruto whimpered rather loudly into Izuna's ears, Mo, when will we arrive to your stupid compound? I want to finish healing your kin so I can go back home and cook my dinner. She can be a brat at times, but if you're bored, you'll turn into one too. Additionally, a bored Naruto can be dangerous. Naruto sarcastically retorted, look here, Pinky.I am a woman and there is nothing to be ashamed of being one. Shut up woman. We are moving stealthily and, shut up man. We are moving stealthily and, Naruto turned to yell at the Uchiha who dared to shout at her. With an apologetic tone that contrasted with the sneer on his face, the other Uchiha said, Manatsu-san, please forgive my kin. He doesn't seem to realize how valuable and beautiful creature you are. Izuna-san, please tell this gentleman that even though your genjutsu confuses my senses, I can still feel their animosity. A polite facade with a vile heart and black intention do not belong in the same line, should they? Naruto smiled, resting her chin against Izuna's shoulder, oblivious to the 2 Uchiha's dropped jaws. Izuna ignored them because he was considering moving quickly to save his father. After a few hours, or what she believed to be hours, because of the genjutsu, Naruto was finally laid carefully on the ground. After a brief pause, the genjutsu was released, causing her senses to gradually return to normal. By blinking, she became aware that she was in a traditional hallway of a well-kept compound that resembled a castle. Naruto turned to face Izuna, who encouraged her to follow him, and said, this way Manatsu-san. Observing how few maids and worrywarts would bow to Izuna and gaze at her with interest, she walked elegantly behind him. They both extended their arms to a well-decorated shoji screen room. 2 warriors stood guard in the room, bowed to the Uchiha before her, and opened the door. When they entered the room, they saw a woman and a man attempting to save an elderly man. Naruto gazed at the 4 men and 3 women who were the medics pouring their chakra into the man's leaking chest. They were squandering their chakra in vain, so Naruto looked around the room before meeting the man's gaze. I just stopped the fate of this world. I freed people from pain, suffering, and emptiness. Naruto, you're getting in the way of everyone's happiness. Our game ends here. I turned hell into heaven. You should understand, it's already over. As Naruto's icy azure eyes gazed at the person who had destroyed her world, 2 words kept repeating in her mind. Murder him. Murder him. Assassinate him. Madara Uchiha. When his brother eventually entered the room, Uchiha Madara let out a series of inward sighs of relief. Even if they expended all of their chakra in the process, he continued to glare at the Iryo.nin, making sure that they died before his father if it meant that he would live. He may not express it, but he values his father greatly. His only family consists of his father and his younger brother, and he will never again let the Senju clan take them away from him. He looked over at the figure walking behind his brother. She had fair skin, defined cheekbones, a button nose, blonde long straight hair pulled back into a ponytail, and azure bright eyes that looked at him passively while concealing something that unnerved him. She was about a year younger than him and tended to be shorter than average in terms of height. Unable to see how this frail creature could save his father, Madara snarled. Their father needed a skilled Irio.nin, but he was unable to sense her chakra. Did his brother overlook that? Madara glared at the woman who had the audacity to not recoil from his stare. Izuna, who is this woman and where is the healer you spoke of? He asked. This woman dares to look him in the eye while everyone else bows to him? Izuna, have you gone insane? You brought a civilian healer to save our clan head, and a woman at that. Take this useless, pitiful woman out of my sight and you make sure to heal my father or so help me. Madara growled, activating his Sharingan, and cut his brother. Inoue, this is Minatsu-san. She is a healer from Matsumoto village and... Madara's speech was abruptly interrupted by a gasp, and everyone gaped at the scene before them. Madara snarled and grabbed the tabi sock that had landed on his face out of the blue. Madara gave the woman, who had just gotten out of her throwing position, a murderous glare and said, "Shut up Pinky.I." The woman dared to look him in the eyes without flinching. I don't know who you think you are, idiot. Izuna asked me for help, and I won't leave before helping him. Does it matter if I am a civilian and what the hell is wrong of me being a woman? You can't just go and call me worthless without giving me a chance? No, I don't care, what do you think? I will heal that old man whether you like it or not. Madara and everyone else were perplexed by the woman who walked to his father's resting place while hissing curses, which caused everyone to blush. Except Madara, of course, since he is a Uchiha. The woman who dismissed him sat by his father's side, and Madara frowned after her. Madara came to her side and gripped her hand angrily just as she was ready to touch his person. Until she glanced at him out of the corner of her eye, he maintained his death grip. His killer intent flared in a wave that choked everyone in the room, with the exception of his brother, who flinched slightly. If he died, I will have your head. When Madara saw the girl snort, "As you wish, Pinky," and dismiss his murderous intent with ease, he narrowed his Sharingan. What are you waiting for? Bring me some warm water and keep it coming. She yelled at the frozen Irio.nin after snatching her hand out of his grasp. Despite being unnerved by her bravado, he was satisfied that his threat had been received and went back to his original position, maintaining a hawk-eye gaze on the woman. He saw her finger open, and his father gripped his eyelids to look into his eyes. After that, she closed her eyes and listened to his pulse while resting the left side of her face on his father's chest. One of the women said, "Healer Sama, bring a barrel of warm water. This is the water you requested." Whoever wanted this man dead sure did some number on him, the woman said, whistling to get things straight. A sudden hum of chakra surrounded her hand as she brought it to the bucket of water. She raised her hand, and a ball of water floated beneath it. Madara heard his brother, who was sitting next to him, murmur, "Amazing, that need perfect level of control." After observing the water floating bowl follow her hand as it positioned over his father's chest, Madara saw his relatives obey her commands mindlessly. "Hold him down, it will be painful." She pushed her hand forward and said, "Here I go." Madara's clansmen relaxed their hold as the water began to seep into their leader's chest. After a chorus of, "Hi," the woman pushed him back to the ground and yelled, "I said hold him down, idiot." His father let out a startled cry of pain. The purple liquid that was floating inside his father's chest vanished and then emerged from the point above the heart. When the entire ball of water was out, she carried it over to the empty barrel and let it drop. Madara's unbidden eyes fixed the woman who continued to shout, "Next, we will repeat that, so be prepared." Next. She repeated her action repeatedly until 13 barrels of poisoned water were filled. After wiping the perspiration from her brow, she faced the Irio.nin, who was awaiting her next command. The woman turned to look at Madara passively for a moment before turning to one of the men and saying, "Please take me to the kitchen and bring that barrel with you. You can use bandages to seal his wounds. I will work on a counter for that poison. Be delicate," she said. She then departed with one of the men on her toe and her straw backpack. After following her until she averted his eyes, Madara turned to face his father, who was breathing more easily now. She completed the task in less than an hour, and it appears that her actions were more beneficial than those of their medical staff. "Izuna," was the quiet message Madara used to draw his brother's attention. Izuna gazed at his brother, who asked, "Who is this woman? Tell me everything you know," while maintaining eye contact with his father's body. "And who does he think himself is?" She was regarded with wonder by the Uchiha women and the guard who led Naruto to the kitchen. She began cursing their clan higher as soon as she walked into the kitchen, but not before attracting the attention of every Uchiha with her long golden hair and staring blue eyes. Since she was developing the anti-venom for their clan head, none of them dared to interfere. Who was stupid enough to stand in the way of an irate woman who had the audacity to hurl her tabi sock in the Madara's face? Yes, that is what all Uchiha are talking about right now. When ninjas and those with a greater understanding of ninja training saw her opening a few herbs from one of the scrolls in her flimsy backpack, they were amazed. They observed that she moved precisely as she boiled, mixed, and cut, all the while cursing and ignoring them. Then she got up and turned with a tray that included a jar of sake, needles for Chinese acupuncture, and a steaming anti-poison. The guard blushed slightly as he was commended with a small, warm smile and offered to take the tray. The Uchiha leader was lying in the main room, and they walked back there. Naruto paused to take a deep breath. When they got to the room, she decided there was no need to be hostile toward that bastard. Naruto entered with a grace that no one would have thought she possessed after the guards opened the door for them. Sitting calmly next to the elderly man, she observed Madara and his brother settling on her right side, close to their father's head. She took the tray from the Uchiha who were following her and set it on the ground without looking at them. With caution, one of the Iryo.nin said, "Healer Sama, would you mind telling us what are you doing?" After locking eyes with him, Naruto described the old man and gestured to the still injured leader, observing how some of the attendees frowned at her lack of deference. "Was poisoned with one of the deadliest venom I have seen. In fact, it was a combination of rare poisons here in Hai no Kuni," she added, shrugging off their annoyance with her. She removed the needles and dipped them in the previously prepared, now cool anti-venom. The words, "the poison is a bit H to deal with," caused some people to scowl at her, but she chose to ignore them once more. She used a cotton ball to dab some sake over the areas of his body where she intended to use it. She snorted and remarked, "Whoever infected him must have hated his gut." Carefully avoiding any wrapped wounds, she placed several acupuncture needles in different locations, such as between his eyebrows, on the right side of his neck, and close to his right lung. She sat up straight once more and counted to 10 in her head. When the timer sounded, everyone saw Tajima's labor breath return to its regular rhythm. She removed the needles and raised her hand to hover just above his chest. Naruto muttered, and Kami said, "Let there be light," as she activated her chakra and spread joy throughout the space. When the Uchiha men noticed that they could only see the chakra above her hands and not feel it being built, they flared their Sharingan at her. Madara was unable to understand what he was seeing because, normally, he could sense chakra while being built, but in this instance, he was standing next to a woman he thought was a moron, only to feel the sudden outburst of chakra from hands. He muttered, "Impossible," as he sensed her chakra infiltrating his father's body. Her chakra abruptly vanished as soon as it was called, leaving the shell men stunned and silent. Naruto removes the bandage from the elderly man, revealing skin free of scars and wounds. She checked her work and put her hand back over his chest. "I'm leaving," she said as she stood up and walked to the door, giving herself a mental pat on the shoulder and a satisfied nod. "Wait a minute." Naruto forced herself to look over her shoulder at the Uchiha's higher, fighting the urge to moan. His arms were crossed over his shoulders, and he remained seated. "Our clan head hasn't waken up yet," he said, giving her the cool Uchiha look. With a graceful, golden eyebrow, Naruto asked, "Is he now?" The Uchiha leader then gradually flattened his eyelids in response to her signal. She gave Madara a sly smile before turning to keep up her pace in order to outpace the pursuit. In relief, Izuna called out, "Chichiyu," while assisting his father in setting. "Izuna?" was called in a rough voice as the head of the Uchiha family looked at his youngest child's relieved smile. This time, Naruto moaned and turned to give the uninterested man a heated glare. "Still, your job isn't done, woman." Everybody in the room could see Madara's arrogant tone. "You haven't briefed as at my father's state." Naruto's eyebrows twitched, but she took a mental breath to calm herself. "My apologies, Pinky Chan." Madara's squinted eyes brightened Naruto's day. The words, "Old man, you were about to die but thanks to my awesomeness you are alive," came out of her mouth as she turned to face the blank Uchiha's head. Because of Minatsu's brazen demeanor, Izuna couldn't help but smile. He continued to question why she continued to disparage his beloved brother and showed no regard for his father by calling him, "old man." However, her poise is a welcome diversion from the rigid etiquette that governs his clan life. "Chichiyu, this is Minatsu. She is the one who healed you," Izuna said, observing how his father arched an eyebrow at her words in question. His father nodded, then returned his attention to Naruto with the single thought, "We found our clan new healer and she shall not leave." The reckless shrug that Naruto gave caused everyone to glare at her. The poison was created for two jobs: kill you, and make you suffer. Obviously the former of the two we managed to save you from. But the later, may you suffered. With a rather adorable head tilt, she asked abruptly, "Nay old man, you are the clan head no?" "Well, that could be a problem then," Tajima said with a tense nod, and everyone squinted at her. Madara was the one who inquired, "What do you mean?" Naruto gave him a disdainful glance before turning to face the clan chief. She uttered the words, "Doctor-patient confidentiality," while awaiting authorization. Tajima said calmly, but you could hear the tone of his voice was non-negotiable. "Madara, Izuna stay and the rest of you leave us." After the door had been locked, Naruto said, "The poison is undetectable and thus I won't bomb your Iryo.nin seeing that they lack full training. The poison is designed to eat your chakra pathway and you know how it is impossible to live without a one. The process is supposed to take at least 3 days and during that time you would feel unbearable pain. Once at least 50% of your chakra pathway disappears, the poison will start to attack your internal major organs like heart, kidney and so on." There was a tense silence as Naruto inhaled and allowed her words to sink into the 3 Uchiha minds. The poison's work accelerate whenever it feel healing chakra, and that is why about 80% of your chakra network is dead. Izuna began by staring at his father's serene, unrevealing mask with wide, anxious eyes. As he continued to look at the young healer without emotion, he saw his brother cross his arms more tightly. When Naruto noticed the glass gaze on Uchiha's head, she took advantage of the fact that his sons were now staring at him with a covert worry. "I managed to heal your wounds and save the pathways that are necessary for you to live, but even I can't regrow chakra pathway. It seems that your warring days are over, old man." She quietly shut the door behind her and strolled through the Uchiha compound's streets. She transformed herself into a small squirrel and walked down an alley, creating a cloudless, silent clone of herself that continued to walk around the compound. The clone called for the guard to open the gate. "I'm leaving now," as it approached what appeared to be the compound's gate slowly. She caught the attention of 2 men standing watch at the wooden gate, which was closed. They identify her as the woman that Izuna, the youngest son of their clan head, brought over his back. They were relieved that their clan head was safe, but they still sensed that something was amiss. Miko Sama bowed and then asked, "What are you doing over here if I may ask?" "I just finished healing your clan head and now I'm on my way to home. Would you please open the gate?" Despite the carefree, serene demeanor they associated with the priestess aura, they were aware of the security protocols for escorting strangers into and out of their compound. Never leave or enter without genjutsu, and never be left alone without an escort, neither of which are applied to this Miko. One of the guards named Miko Sama approached her. He had the usual Uchiha features, but he had a scar across his nose that made Naruto think of Iruka. The terrified guard received a pout that made him smile in private. "You have our gratitude for healing our clan head, but please wait until an escort and permission arrive from our leaders to let you go." If Naruto had been a lesser man, the puppy eyes might have worked. "But I have to cook my dinner, you know. Can't you let me go please?" "I'm sorry, but you have to follow me back to." "Sorry, I got to go." Naruto threw him over her shoulder while holding his extended arm before he hurried to the gate. The man moaned, "Stop her," and the Uchiha, who were nearby from the gate, pursued. "It appears that Bitsuma killed me." Izuna had never witnessed his father so furious. He didn't frown like this even after his brother Madara was caught making friends with Hashirama. However, losing one's chakra is equivalent to being dead for a ninja. How about leading a powerful clan that takes pride in its dojutsu, which requires chakra to activate? Izuna couldn't help but smile at his brother in an attempt to comfort his father. "Chichiyu, you are still alive and you can help us destroy those filth even without heading with us toward the war. Your presence alone is more than enough, which is something that the Senju will definitely fear." It was incredibly touching of him, even if his natural tone concealed it. Tajima nodded and said, "I will leave leading the clan for you. But first thing first, the healer must stay. Such an advantage shouldn't be wasted." Izuna's father nodded when he said, "I will try to convince her to join our clan Chichiyu." All of a sudden, they heard fighting and shouting coming from the entrance to the compound. They all bolted out of the room and ran toward the chaos, only to gasp when they saw that a helpless woman easily defeated their clan. She quickly dodged the blows and gave her assailant a blow that left her messed up. Only taijutsu was used in the battle, and based on her forms, they were unable to discern any reasoning. It was one of those blizzards that shows up just when you expect a kick. Everyone winced as Naruto yelled, "Get out of my way, weakling," and struck one of the men on his family jewel. "What a waste of time," was the mutter of Madara as he passed his deceased relatives. He abruptly showed up at Naruto's side and twisted her arm behind her back, asking, "What are you doing?" He restrained her by pulling her against his chest. The men bowed to him during Madara Sama, and looked at him in disgrace at being defeated by a civilian, and a woman at that. Naruto blinked, oblivious to his presence beside her. Then, startled by her yell, "His is touching me. Let me go, you pervert." Madara relaxed his hold, allowing Naruto to flee and hide behind an alarmed Izuna. The words, "Izuna, help me, that rapist just touched me," came out of her weak voice as she sniffed. Tajima found it amusing to watch his oldest son become irritated. Madara yelled indignantly, There Manatsu-san. Inoue didn't mean to touch you like that. You can't be serious." Izuna gave him a pitying smile, telling him to comply. "I will keep you safe, Manatsu-san." After sniffling, Naruto looked at him and made a promise, while crying. Izuna noticed that his brother couldn't help but roll his eyes and ing at him, so he gave him his most endearing smile and said, "I promise." Naruto's cheek flushed as she played with her fingers and lowered her eyes to the ground, just like Hinata. Izuna gently reprimanded Manatsu-san, saying, "However, please refrain from hurting our men." Naruto turned to face the men on the ground, who were staring at her. Naruto pointed to the gatekeeper, who gave her a fierce look. "But Izuna-san, they attacked me and he didn't open the gate for me to leave," Naruto said. Madara gritted his teeth and said, "That's because we didn't give you permission to leave yet, woman. There is another thing we want you to do." With a smirk that unnerved the Uchiha men, Naruto abandoned her innocent girl persona and said, "But Pinky-chan, I have places to go, people to heal, and ramen to eat. Nay." She then made a victory sign with her fingers and vanished without a trace. A few miles ahead in the forest, a squirrel transformed into a blonde girl who laughed at the faces that the clone remembered being dumbfounded. She muttered, "Idiot," and headed for her village. A smooth voice uttered the words, "Indeed there," before a blow struck the back of her neck, sending her into silence. Naruto was aware that something wasn't right. The fact that she couldn't recall going to bed made her uneasy. Her years of playing practical jokes helped her maintain her composure and sleep. She noticed that her sensory range was somehow limited, but she stretched her senses to realize that she was alone wherever she was. She realized she was a prisoner because something was obstructing her senses. Given that she was able to turn to her side, she was not bound. Seeing that she could feel chakra a few meters to her left, she moaned and snuggled into her bellow. She looked at her surroundings and flattered her eyes. On her left was a shoji screen, and she was in a traditional Japanese room. Although it was a symbolic room, the interior design was good. Naruto became aware that she was not dressed normally all of a sudden. On the left side of her chest, a feather symbol was stitched into her clean underwear. "I've seen this symbol before." Naruto raised an eyebrow in response. She looked around for her clothes, but there were none. Then she watched suspiciously as the shoji screen quickly slid to the left. The woman who entered the room had a look of pure shock on her face, but she quickly softened it into a warm smile. As Naruto examined the woman, he saw that she had light brown eyes and long brown hair. Her hair is in a braid on one side and straight on the other. She also wears a clip that has two circular patterns on it. She accessorized with a pink kimono that was secured with a pink sash. Naruto saw that the area above her heart was stitched with the same feather symbol. She made Naruto think of someone she couldn't recall, which is why she waited patiently. The woman quietly closed the shoji screen and signed behind her back, saying, "I see that you are awake, Miko-sama." When Naruto attempted to sense the outside of the room, she discovered that her senses were being obscured by some sort of block. "Genjutsu?" She considered smiling a little for the woman. Given her desire to project a bewildered, anxious civilian persona, Naruto cautiously asked, "Who are you, if you don't mind me asking?" As she stood next to Naruto's futon, the woman grinned and said, "My name is Kurama Ume Manatsu Miko." "Sama?" Naruto asked defensively, "How did you know my name?" before answering, "No need to worry, Miko. Sama. We mean you no harm. Yuichi. Sama will explain everything to you. I'm here to help you dress and guide you to the meeting room." A kimono on a stander with boxes on the floor was visible as the woman, now known as Ume, stood and placed her hand on one of the walls. Naruto thought, "Genjutsu it is," as the woman opened the boxes to reveal various types of jewelry and makeup. Then she smiled kindly at Naruto and gestured for her to wash with a bowl of water that suddenly materialized on her left. Naruto forged her thoughts in surprise. It must have been covered by a genjutsu, but how come I couldn't sense it? After laughing at her amazed look, the woman waited for her to wash her face. Ume asked her to approach her after she had done so. Ume let her touch the kimono and asked, "Do you like it?" It had a beautiful color combination, was soft, and was composed of the best materials. Somewhere in there, she can also see orange, however, it would impede my mobility. I couldn't run for it while wearing this, Naruto mused frowningly. In order to learn how to act like a woman and fight while wearing tight dresses, Kunoichis took some after school lessons. This is how Sakura was able to look good in her red dress during their genin days. Being a girl who lived in a boy's disguise, Naruto regrets not enrolling in those classes. Naruto apologized and remarked, "It is beautiful, Kurama-san, but I can't accept wearing it. You see, being a Miko means that we are humble creatures. We are children of Earth after all. I wouldn't need to wear such pretty clothes. I bet you that I will destroy it accidentally and I won't forgive myself if that happened," Naruto thought before Ume could say anything. "Nonsense!" Ume exclaimed, unmoved. Ume fussed and then made Naruto stand motionless while she assisted her in donning the kimono. "Your old clothes are still being washed, Miko. Sama. This is a gift from Yuichi. Sama. He will take it as an offense if you didn't wear it, Miko, Sama." According to Naruto, the kimono was better suited for a geisha because she had to wear layers of them with accessories dangling from her obi. After that, she was made to set and allow Ume to style her hair. She remarked on how soft her hair was as she brushed it and asked her how she kept it smooth, shiny, and soft without using any knit. Given that she prioritized her training over her hair and neglected to cut it short as usual, Naruto simply shrugged. After completing the final hair accessory, her attendant proceeded to apply a hint of red to Naruto's flushed cheeks and red lip paint to her lips. Before assisting her in standing, she fussed about how adorable and lovely she was and that she wasn't concerned that many men would be swayed by her charm. "Even my weight seal didn't make me feel as heavy as those clothes," Naruto complained to himself. Ume led her through the hallways after opening the shoji screen and saying, "This way, Miko. Sama." Naruto paused to consider her surroundings. Although the compound she was in was smaller than the Uchiha compound, it still exuded elegance and beauty. She still had the hazy sensation that unnerved her because she couldn't feel anything outside of her eyes. The brunette's clothing made it difficult for Naruto to follow her calmly, so he thought, "This is bad." Ume halted abruptly and bent her knees while sitting on the ground. Ume said, "Yuichi. Sama, I brought Miko. Sama as you ordered," and the shoji screen opened. She smiled and gestured for Naruto to come in, which he did with a dejected gesture. The shoji screen softly closed behind her as soon as she entered. Naruto quickly turned as she noticed the shoji screen disappearing out of the corner of her eye, leaving her to gaze at the wooden walls. Naruto looked at a man sitting over a Zaisu chair and said, "Ah, that is one of our jutsu Miko. Sama. Genjutsu similar to the one you used to disguise yourself as a squirrel before leaving the Uchiha compound." Like Ume, he had amused brown eyes and curly brown hair. Naruto reasoned that it must be a clan trait. She kept her face composed and unimpressed as she observed how he was using a sloppy poster that worried her more than it calmed her. Like Ume, he was a young man of her age, dressed in a dark navy yukata with the same white feather symbol across the chest fabric. He waved his hand for her to have a seat, and suddenly a zabuton cushion materialized a few inches in front of her. With no other option, Naruto followed his instructions and waited for him to clarify her purpose. "I take offense at that Naruto gestured for him to introduce himself. "I must say that this kimono suits you better than the cheap Miko clothes you were wearing. Yuichi, Kurama Yuichi, the 18th clan head at your service," he said, smiling playfully and bowing to her. "I see, the Kurama clan's name wasn't that similar to Yakumo's." Gazing at him with unreadable eyes, Naruto pondered. The words, "Our spy talked about a healer that saved the Uchiha head, which is not an easy feat seeing that we wanted him dead," made Naruto stiffen, and he shot her another satirical glance. An ugly sneer at Naruto's boyish face accompanied the disgusting tone, which did not go unnoticed. It was a great opportunity to get rid of those Uchiha after weakening them by taking their head. The beautiful thing is that we did it secretly during Tajima's fight against the Senju head. But even so, they are still weak and we can still attack them and prove that we are better at genjutsu than them. Naruto said, "That is cool and dandy, but why am I here?" And Yuichi gave her another playful smile. You, my lovely sunshine, managed to crack the poison that I spend some of my clan fortune to buy. Such a capable pretty woman like you shouldn't be forced to work for the Uchiha. But I should work for you? Naruto responded with a second grin. Yuichi rose from his position and approached her in a stately manner. As his hands moved down her arm from her shoulder to her fingers, he sat behind her and lowered his face toward her left ear. She took a breath and said, Yuichi-san, please, there is something called personal space, despite Naruto's desire to kill him at that precise moment. Yuichi put his head on her shoulder and pouted. Miko. Sama, you are so mean, he said, encircling her waist with his hands and drawing her slender figure closer to him. He gave a yelp when Naruto pinched his hand, but he held on to it. Miko. Sama, I was wondering how is the Uchiha head now? Doctor Patient confidentially, was Naruto's flat manner. Yuichi reached for her eyes that were impassive. Miko. Sama, information is power. We planted a spy in Uchiha force to get information on them to know when to strike. I would like to know more about the clan head before I send my men to assassinate him. You would save lives by telling me about your patient. Naruto suddenly felt lightheaded and said, that's why. Tell me about the head's condition now. She heard whispers in her ear requesting that she tell him. She attempted to use her chakra to block them, but she was unable to control it. Kurama. Clan, Naruto said, tightly closing her eyes. Then she opened her ether eyes and looked into Yuichi's interested eyes. Naruto saw how he stiffened at her statement. You are the one with the Kurama clan's Kekkei Genkai, aren't you? She became aware of the momentary blurring of her surroundings. Yuichi gazed off to his left until the surroundings stabilized. What do you know about my clan Kekkei Genkai? He asked icily, narrowing his eyes as he stared at her. Naruto smiled and replied, nothing much. I only know that your clan power of Genjutsu is due to your Kekkei Genkai. And once every generation a member of the clan will be born with such enormous skill in Genjutsu that their illusions causes the brain to make anything that happens to the victim within the Genjutsu physically real, allowing the clan member to potentially kill their opponents with Genjutsu. You are that one, aren't you, Yuichi-kun? Yuichi squinted, unsure of how she had discovered their clan's secret. He asked, trying to hide his surprise, am I now? Yup. Seeing how things started to appear out of nowhere and how they felt so real, I came to know that you were the destined one. Now Yuichi-kun, won't you let me out of this Genjutsu? Or should I say Yuichi's second persona? Unexpectedly Naruto felt hands on her neck. Yuichi pushed her to the ground and saddled her. Yuichi's face changed. His iris turned from brown to sliver with no pupil, and his eyes sclera turned to black void. His ears became slightly pointed, and a black horn appeared in the middle of his forehead. His nails had grown to the size of black claws, and his clothes were now ripped. His voice had become rough. How did you know about me? He asked. It was difficult, and Naruto could clearly see how his teeth were growing longer and sharper, resembling Kyuubi's. Answer me, he snarled, gripping her neck more tightly. The room disintegrated, transforming into a chaotic, navy, dark space that made Naruto shudder. As she clawed at his hands, Naruto gasped for air and became terrified because she was unable to feel her own strength. She was able to say, Yakumo, before it released its grip on her throat. Naruto coughed in an attempt to recover the strength that the Genjutsu had denied her. Naruto thought distressingly, he is stronger than Yakumo ever was, at least back then I managed to fight, but now I can't even feel my chakra well. As another Yuichi emerged, Naruto uttered slowly, she was a Kurama just like you. In contrast to the persona who was saddling her with black armor above it, he was dressed in a white kimono. Yakumo was the name that the real Yuichi slowly tried. Yuichi narrowed his eyes and remarked, I never heard of this Yakumo. All those who awakened Ito became clan heads. The person who is now known as Ito threatened to snatch her neck once more. Naturally, he was unaware of her existence. Naruto reasoned that she would be born in about a century. Yuichi nodded in agreement with Naruto's statement that was the name she gave me. Maybe she wasn't the clan head seeing that she is a woman. Also maybe she didn't give me her real name. Yuichi titled his head and said, so she told you about our secret, do you think of me as a fool, Miko? Chan? I'm offended. Yakumo lost control over her Ito to the point that it killed her parent. Do you want that to happen to you? Asked Naruto, staring into his eyes as Yuichi gaped at her in shock. Yuichi was doubted by Naruto's single question, are you? Which caused the Ito's eyes to briefly light up. She probably didn't have training for her abilities. I on the other hand had a proper schooling, that is why I am the one who in control, not my Ito. Yuichi firmly said, yes, I am, gesturing to his Ito to move away from her, which it did with some hesitation. The Edo moved to Yuichi's back. When Yuichi snapped his finger, a wide meadow with long grasses appeared around them. As his Edo leapt to crunch over one of the branches, Yuichi sat beneath a sakura tree that had emerged behind him. Yuichi said, "Now about the Uchiha head," with a casual smile that abruptly turned into a frown. Such a cheap genjutsu," Naruto said as her head abruptly swung to her side and her speed made a loud clicking sound. Her eyes widened and she saw that Uchiha Madara was standing beside her. Her surroundings abruptly transformed into a forest. Yuichi, wearing armor, was standing a few feet ahead of her, 3 katana pointing at his neck as she appeared to be setting on the ground. They were surrounded by 4 corpses on the ground, drowning in their own blood, and their armor bore the Kurama clan's emblem. Aside from the 3 men standing by Yuichi, Naruto turned to see about 5 Uchiha men encircling them. "Are you alright, Minato-san?" Naruto asked, turning to her left to see Madara standing by her right with his arms crossed in his cool Uchiha stance, and Izuna crunching by her side with worried eyes. She asked slowly, "What is going on?" And Izuna responded, "We are here to save you from them." "Oh, Madara, it has been a while," Madara said, raising an eyebrow at the brunette, who smiled casually. "And you are?" Yuichi's head had a tick mark on it. "Oi, don't tell me that you have forgotten my name." Kurama's head whimpered as his hand reached for his sleeve's inner pocket. Izuna appeared to stand guard in front of Naruto, his Sharingan exploding into action. Madara remarked casually, "I don't remember unimportant names," and Yuichi pouted, "Meanie. Oh well, my fair lady, we shall meet again." After throwing a smoke bomb, Yuichi vanished. Madara said, "Let him go," stopping his men as they gaped at him. Madara turned to face Naruto with a detached expression. "We killed his brother, who is second to him in terms of power. This will teach him not to lay a hand on what is ours." Madara said calmly, "Try to run again, and I will spank you on your behind, woman," then pivoted on his heel and left. Naruto sat on the ground and inhaled deeply and slowly. She was laughing at the faces of the Uchiha 1 minute, and then she was ensnared in a Kurama's genjutsu. Did Umi-san practice genjutsu? As she examined the corpses of the men surrounding her, Naruto pondered. Umi-san was a fake. "I'm the only woman here," Naruto thought to himself. The blonde gazed at her outfit, which was in her typical Miko fashion. As she watched the Uchiha men seal the corpses into scrolls, she thought, not a fancy kimono for sure. Izuna turned to face her and said, "Shall we go, Minato-san?" Naruto reluctantly nodded and allowed Izuna to use his genjutsu on her again because she was worn out and had lost the ability to fight or flee. She woke up in the morning and stretched her arms while gazing at the room she was in at the time. Nothing fancy, just 1 futon over the tatami sheets. "Probably a guard to make sure that I don't run again." Naruto smirked to herself as she folded her futon and looked around for her straw backpack, which she couldn't find. She felt a presence outside the door of the room. To let the guard know she was awake, she sighed and flared her chakra. After a brief pause, a Uchiha man she didn't recognize appeared on the shoji screen that slid to the right. His onyx eyes stared at her without emotion, and his hair was short and spiky. His poster made her think of Neji, which made her smile a little. He nodded and said, "Miko. Sama, good rising. Please follow me." He led her through the compound at a leisurely pace, and Naruto followed, pausing before a door. A vast hall that could accommodate hundreds of people if necessary was in front of her when he opened the door. The man led her to her seat and said, "Breakfast was served an hour ago, but we didn't want to wake you seeing as you were probably rather tired from yesterday's commotion." A woman approached from behind him, set a low serving table in front of her, and then left right away after making a respectful bow of the head. Naruto realized she hadn't eaten since last night when her stomach decided to let out a rather loud growl at that precise moment. She checked her food for anything fishy, and when everything was okay, she gobbled it up. She put down her chopsticks and said a quiet, "Thank you," after the last grain of rice had been removed from her bowl. The guard motioned her to follow him, saying, "This way, Miko. Sama." They passed a lot of men dressed in training gear and a few in armor on their way to the new location. She assumed these men were on guard duty. As Naruto looked around her, she thought, it appears that they are taking a break from battle since their clan head has been injured. Her guide nodded to each of them as they came to a guarded room, and they then slid the shoji screen open to reveal a meeting room. As Naruto felt all eyes on her, she thought, looks like I'm about to be judged in court. If you counted the guards outside the door and in the shadows, there were about 13 men in the room. Naruto saw that she was positioned in the room as though she were being tried. Madara was on his right, and Izuna was on his left, and she was standing directly in front of the clan head, More accurately, she was standing while he was seated. Although she couldn't recall seeing the other men yesterday, she assumed they were the clan elders because they were permitted to attend the meeting. As they gazed at her with varying degrees of frowns and some with mild curiosity, the fact that they all had gray hair and wrinkles only strengthened her first impression. Naruto slouched as she stood, thinking, how wonderful. The clan head said, Manatsu-san, I'm glad that you are back, grinning a little. He said amiably, I hope that the breakfast was to your liking? Naruto replied with a smile, yeah, old man. She was aware that she was being glared at for her disrespect, but she chose to ignore it. The clan chief had a frustrated expression on his face, but he covered it up by opening a scroll by his side. One of the elderly geezers mocked her, saying, you will show proper respect, woman. Naruto shrugged casually and continued on without incident. With genuine interest, she inquired, when will I go home? With his focus still fixed on his scroll, Tajima said, well, about that, I have a proposition for you. I would like you to work as our healer Manatsu-san. We will provide you with a house and you will get paid handsomely for your services, of course. Looking at Izuna, Naruto narrowed her eyes and said, I have a duty to my village. I declined the offer when Izuna-san presented it earlier. Tajima said, that is a pity, as he carefully put the scroll down by his side and gave her a blank look. You were kidnapped the moment you left our compound yesterday, child. What makes you think that it won't happen again, especially now that every clan knows about your talents? An arrogant elder replied. With a shiver of fear running up her spine, Naruto asked, what do you mean? We had a Kurama clan spy within our ranks, although you were brought here furtively. Their clan head heard about how you healed Tajima. Dono, and not an hour after you fled from here you were under their mercy. The moment you leave this compound you will be targeted again. I can assure you that we have our own spies in other clans as well, and they have already confirmed that those clans have knowledge of your talents, Miko. Sama. The elder's voice was mockingly sad. Let us be honest here, old geezer. I'm an edge and burden to your clan, and to keep your clan safe you will keep me here whether I want it or not, Naruto said bluntly. Observing that his words had no effect on her, the older man scowled. With his arms folded across his chest, Madara glared at the blonde annoyance from the sidelines, saying, if you know that, then don't look a gift. Horse in the mouth and just get to your duties. He felt that his time was being wasted on these proceedings. The girl would work for them in one way or another because they already had her in their sights. Madara didn't consider her to be out of his grasp because he would always get what he wanted. Looking at their clan head, Naruto smiled innocently and said in a sweet voice, you see Pinky-chan, there is something very beautiful about Iryo Jutsu. You can inflict wounds that your enemy won't notice right away, and they will live their life feeling nothing out of the ordinary until they suddenly drop dead. A single touch is more than enough to kill. What makes you think that I won't pretend to heal your men while I kill them instead without you knowing the difference? What makes you think that I fully healed your father when I might have made sure that his chakra continues to kill him discreetly? Was a question that no one in the room was able to understand. Madara's intent to kill swept through the room as his eyes widened. He didn't like what he read between the lines, and he didn't like that she so easily disregarded his desire to kill. Madara recalled, she's had ninja training. She's good enough to have managed to keep my men busy, even beating them with ease. If it weren't for the Kurama clan spy's orders to take her and their idiot leader's incredibly stupid decision to trap her in a genjutsu in the forest, why didn't he take her to their compound and make her spill the beans there? She had perfect control over her chakra to the point where she could sneak out of our compound without anyone noticing her. Madara continued to reflect on the recent events before his younger brother interrupted him. She would have left our own compound without a clue as to where she had gone. Izuna abruptly smiled and said, I trust that you have healed my Chichiyu to the best of your abilities. I don't believe that you would hurt him, Manatsu-san. Manatsu raised an eyebrow and said, oh? Izuna nodded, and the boy explained out loud in affirmation, you are a Miko and a healer at that. Your training requires you to save life no matter which it belongs to. Naruto asked, tilting her head sweetly to one side, what makes you think that I'm a Miko? With a sharp gaze on her clothing, Izuna asked sharply, aren't you? The girl lectured while tugging at her hakama for emphasis. I wear these because I'm quite a clumsy girl. My guardian noticed how I couldn't walk with grace in a regular kimono and thus asked me to wear this, Naruto explained, holding her hakama trousers. Naruto giggled in understanding after noticing his stare. I thought that you shinobi looked underneath and never judged your opponent based on what they looked like. She was a Miko herself, but seeing that the usual garb is invaluable to her, I suggested wearing orange hakama instead of the regular red. Besides, orange is a badass color. Naruto released her orange clothing and carried on. You are the ones who assumed that I was a Miko. I simply didn't correct you, seeing that it would keep me safe. After all, priestesses are holy women and it is common knowledge that they won't be harmed. Madara congratulated herself inwardly on her cleverness. Wearing men's hakama is a dead giveaway that she didn't want her clothing to impede her movements and that she could be a potential enemy, but she completely avoided such suspicion by allowing us to go along with our own initial assumption, he thought, confirming that she is a priestess, knowing everyone will give her respect without hesitation. His admiration for the girl's abilities grew with every second that went by. As he continued to evaluate the situation, Madara thought, now that she has shed her disguise, it is our top priority to make sure that she didn't harm father with her jutsu back when she was healing him. He did not display any signs of concern. He quickly collected his chakra and linked the defiant blonde's azure eyes to his now visible Sharingan. She gave him a casual blink, cocked her head, and brushed him off again. When Madara realized he couldn't use genjutsu on her, his eyes widened in shock. What on earth is happening? Madara glared at the girl and pondered, his Sharingan still active. He had only one acceptable response in mind when he asked the girl, have you done anything to my father aside from healing him? He continued to look at her in an attempt to read her body language, but he was unable to determine whether or not she had done anything. Who knows, maybe I did. Maybe I didn't, Naruto absently retorted. Suddenly, without warning or command, several guards gathered around her and pressed their kunai to her throat. The same man who escorted her to the meeting sneered lowly into the captured girl's ear, saying, it will do you well to answer Madara Sama's question. Naruto responded by raising an eyebrow, but her movements showed no signs of fear. Satoshi was called calmly by Tajima, whose drawl voice was authoritative but emotionless. The guard, who was now known as Satoshi, ceased to glare at the incooperative blonde with his cold, piercing eyes. After making an apologetic bow, he and the others went back to where they had been in the room. Manatsu-san, I trust that you didn't harm me while healing me, and I know that you won't do anything to harm my clansmen either. It is a cowardice act, and from the moment you healed me I knew that you weren't the type to do such a craven act, even if your life depended on it, Tajima said with assurance as she looked her directly in her eyes. Naruto maintained eye contact before humping to break it. When Tajima's words were acknowledged, the tension in the room instantly subsided. For the first time since she had entered the room, Naruto looked seriously at the Uchiha leader. If I were to work for you, every life your men took would also fall upon my shoulders because I was the one that healed them. You fight for pride and vengeance, Tajima-san. I don't want to be dragged into your stupid war. To the soldier, the civilian, the martyr, and the victim, it is just a petty war that wrecks their lives, and seems to never end, especially if you keep fighting like you have been. The soft sigh of, I understand, from Tajima startled her, but our war isn't stupid, Manatsu-san. Think of it, if we stop fighting other shinobi clans, who do you think will be attacked next? Tajima responded with solemnity. Naruto's eyes were filled with dread, and Tajima nodded in agreement. Shinobi will fight for greed, whether that be in the form of money or land, both of which civilians have at the moment. We will attack civilian villages and then force them to pay for protection, or simply kill them to gain their fortunes. It is already happening as we speak, but not as much as it potentially could be, since we are currently too occupied with fighting each other for pride and vengeance, as you so eloquently called it. We fight to protect what is ours, and in doing so there is much collateral damage, but the alternative is far worse. Iruka taught Naruto history, but Naruto never listened. They were excruciatingly dull, and she usually just followed Shikamaru's example and dozed off. However, she didn't look at it again and now detested herself for it, in contrast to Shikamaru, who was already familiar with the material and had learned from it. She lacked the political, current affairs, and power struggles knowledge, as well as the strategic thinking skills necessary to properly process the information she had learned during her stay here and create a plan to assist her in this current circumstance. What if never occurred to her? She had always been good at acting in the heat of the moment, so it hurt her confidence more than she would like to admit that it was so terribly useless at the moment. She was now beginning to doubt herself. What would I do next if I were able to leave the Uchiha clan? The blonde kept thinking about it, and as the seconds went by, she felt more and more dread. In the case that you left, Manatsu-san, and you managed to stay away from other clans, how can you guarantee that those that are trying to find you won't kidnap one of Matsumoto's villagers and use them as a bargaining chip? Like, for example, their life in exchange for your cooperation? A senior citizen asked aloofly. In essence, what gives you the impression that we won't turn your village's residents against you? As rage flared inside her, Naruto translated. Before continuing her thought process, the restless blonde closed her eyes tightly and took a breath, followed by another, to try to calm herself. Until Naruto slowly opened her eyes, pivoted on her heel, and left the room without requesting permission. Everyone in the room waited for her response, the silent threat looming large in the air. Everyone was silent after Naruto left the room because they couldn't quite believe what they had just seen. Nobody even shifted from where they were standing, their gazes fixed on the door from which the girl had just walked. "The nerve of that woman!" cried one of the elders, his face smeared with a frown. The others in the room were awakened by the outburst, and they all loudly agreed, muttering their own grievances in agreement. Tajima looked at his men and said firmly, "Brash and brassy she might be, but a fool she isn't. She can be reasoned with and her skills are greatly needed at this time." He quickly silenced his men's complaints. "Now, while everyone is assembled, another matter needs to be addressed. I would like to announce my retirement. I will step down and let the leadership fall to my heir, Madara. I will act as his counsel until he can rule on his own." Izuna saw his brother sit more erect. His shoulders were tense while he awaited the elder's blessing, and when he got it, he sat proudly. Izuna nodded encouragingly at his brother and then looked back toward the meeting room door. He kept thinking about what Naruto had said. He thought, "Stupid war," but shook his head. "I'm fighting to protect my people and to uphold the honor of my clan. Senju would kill my family without hesitation. They wouldn't care in the least whether they were women, children, or elderly people. In any case, they would be killed, and as a Uchiha, I will not give up until the last Senju is gone. I have a responsibility." With pride swelled inside him and motivation blazing in his veins, Izuna thought for those who had died at their hands, especially for my older brothers who had passed away. Immediately after the meeting ended, Izuna excused himself to look for the young Miko inside the compound. When she healed his father, he committed the chakra's distinctive signature to memory, but he was unable to sense it anywhere. It was cozy, affectionate, and, dare he say it, vibrant. Her powerful chakra captivated his Sharingan, who didn't care what it might do to him. Not even if it helped his father get better. All he wanted to do was sit there and look at it until he was content. Unfortunately, unless she allowed him to, he was unable to sense her chakra. A mystery he sincerely wanted to solve. Izuna looked for the chakra of Satoshi, her designated, full, time guard, after realizing he was unable to sense her. On the northern portion of the compound, close to the prairie, he discovered the man. Izuna used a straightforward shunshin to find them, and when he got close, Satoshi nodded to him from the edge of the meadow. Izuna first saw the troubled Miko's distant gaze as she moved between the grasses and toward the daisy-filled area. He approached her softly and slowly before sitting next to her. Without saying a word, he allowed the summer breeze to gently tousle their hair. Izuna just sat there listening to the enigmatic blonde speak to the breeze. "My friends died in a war. Datbeo. I somehow, with sheer luck, survived while they sacrificed their lives to keep me safe." Her voice was shaking, and he could hear the grief in her tone, the sheer desperation in her voice. He turned to face her and saw her putting her chin on her knees and hugging her legs. Izuna began attempting to console her by saying, "I understand how you feel." Izuna slowly nodded in response to Naruto's question, "Do you?" "My Oka-chan died during an attack on the compound. My 3 elder brothers died as well during a battle. All I have left is Chichiyu, Inoue and my kin. The rest died because of our enemy, the Senju clan. I've trained hard so that I can protect what is mine. What I have left. Chichiyu could have died without your help and for that I'm forever grateful. I don't want my kin to lose their families because we didn't have a decent Irio.nin available to heal them when they needed it. That is why, please help me. Help us." Izuna pleaded before turning and bowing the blonde Miko beside him. Naruto looked at him out of the corner of her eye, trying to think of something to say. Without passing judgment, she asked the boy, "Do you hate Senju clan?" Izuna replied quickly, "Of course, they have killed my kin." Without responding to the young Uchiha's enthusiasm, Naruto softly retorted, "But you have killed many of them too, no?" Izuna cried out, "They're the enemy Manatsu-san. I won't forgive them," wondering why the girl didn't get his point, his suffering. Naruto saw that Izuna took his words at face value. Her words were completely lost on him. He simply detested the Senju to the core. She turned to face the perplexed boy after realizing, they are brought up to despise the Senju clan from an early age. Even though she already knew the answer, Naruto asked, "If you saw one of them right now, what would you do?" Izuna quickly responded, his harness dripping from his words, "I'd kill him." Naruto acknowledged with a slow nod. Naruto explained, because they are the enemy and they are the ones who have killed your kin, and was strongly nodded in agreement. The sentence, Manatsu-san I know that, was interrupted before Izuna could continue. Naruto interrupted, staring into his eyes, and Uchiha killed my friends. Izuna's breath caught in his throat as he gazed wide-eyed at the girl next to him. Have you heard of Nagano village, Izuna-san? It was a village near the mountain near where you found me. 3 years ago it was a village, but now it is nothing but a cemetery. Naruto hissed, her vivid sapphires turning dark like ominous clouds filling a clear sky. He slaughtered them like they were a herd of sheep. Izuna was unable to speak. How could he respond? He had just learned that her village had been massacred because of his clan. He was unable to take his eyes off her azure eyes, which were filled with smothering grief and repressed anger. You would kill a senju that would happen to pass by your side, right? Then how about helping him when he is in need? Can you honestly ask me to work for your clan? To heal your kin? Now that you know that they are the reason that I no longer have my friends, my family, my everything? Izuna drew his eyes shut and turned away from her sharp stare. He was aware that the world was cruel. Any reasonable person would decline to work for them since it would be cruel to ask her to assist them. But she was needed by his clan. He must have been self-centered. He must have been mean. Particularly if it meant he wouldn't have to experience the anguish and fear he had when his father was on the verge of passing away. Finally, knowing that she would say no, he muttered weakly, "Please help me." For what seemed like an hour, he felt her gaze fixed on his bowed body. She stood rigidly and left the clearing without responding, and he was unable to read her aura. Madara gazed curiously at the spiral-shaped seal on the inside of his right wrist. As a small amount of chakra poured into the seal, he focused on the one Sharingan tome that was embedded in the middle of the spiral. Reluctantly, he watched as the seal grew to reveal graceful lines of kanji with incomprehensible shapes. These lines swiftly moved up the inside of his right arm, across his collarbone, and along his chest until they blossomed on the left side of his chest into a spiral that was slightly larger than 3 times the one on his wrist, with 3 Sharingan tomes arrogantly positioned in the middle. Madara complained irritably as he stopped the flow of his chakra, closed the haori of his yukata, and covered his now immaculate chest. The tiny, inconspicuous circle on the inside of his right wrist, which was now concealed by the sleeve of his yukata, was the only sign that a seal had even been applied to him. Madara stepped out of his room and headed for the meeting room, where he had begun to spend most of his time lately. He listened to the elders of his clan argue among themselves about the current status of his clan's affairs while he was alone in those 4 walls. The stability of their food supply, the adequacy of their weapons stockpiles, the training of the clan's future generation and the ongoing training of their current force, the frequency and quality of missions to maintain their treasury and financial planning based on that income, and, of course, the constant planning of their next attack on those bastard senju were all topics of discussion in that room. Madara yelled to himself, "It's beyond me how father managed to stay sane after listening to these overly aged children day in and day out. I would simply burn them with a Gokakyu no Jutsu, Great Fireball Jutsu, and be done with it if I were a lesser man." Madara walked on, imagining the elders' cries and the blissful silence that would ensue after their death. He stopped walking nonchalantly and began to consider the possibility of being free of those intrusive elders. As he played over the consequences of that alluring action, a tiny smirk briefly crossed his lips. He had always lived by the motto, "Take what you want whether that be by force or by death." Why should people beneath him stop him from pursuing his goals? The only options available to those who came into contact with him were to either move aside or perish if they lacked the strength to protect what he wanted. He didn't care about the choice they made, so why would he? He didn't feel the same way about the weak. Such feelings were inappropriate for a shinobi, particularly one of his level. He was the strongest of them all, and weak men were born of weak feelings. He was still perplexed as to why people constantly dragged things along and made them more complicated than they needed to be because it was a very simple way of living. The elders of his clan were extremely fortunate that his father gave him a great deal of instruction in politics, etiquette, and most importantly, patience, who were currently wearing very thin clothing. He looked at his brother out of the corner of his eye, ignoring the petty arguments among the elders. Madara watched his younger brother closely, trying to capture the ephemeral feelings and subtle tenses of his body, because he could tell that he was in distress. In Izuna, Madara had immediately recognized a few problematic emotions. The controlled blankness of Izuna's face and the hollowness of his eyes suggested sorrow. The occasional unsteady breathing and the slight glances into space suggested a slight sense of anxiety, and most obviously, his aura reeked of regret. Even though he did a remarkable job of masking all of these telltale signs, They were not sufficiently concealed for Madara's sharp eyes to detect every emotion. He had spent most of his life with his beloved younger brother, which was more than enough time to be able to read Izuna's every sigh, twitch, and breath like a book. "Izuna," was called by Madara in a quiet, steady voice. Only his brother heard it, and he instantly straightened up and focused more on the meeting that was going on. For the rest of the meeting, Madara remained silent with Izuna. As a clan leader should, he carried out his responsibilities as assigned, offered his opinions when called upon, and made the final decision on some of the more important matters. All the while, he watched his brother, researching him in the hopes of determining what might have caused him to be affected in this way. After the meeting ended, Madara waited until he, his Chichiyu, and Izuna were the only people left in the room. Despite everyone being dismissed, Izuna hadn't even moved from his place on Madara's left side, and Tajima was still sitting on a cushion to his right. Tajima watched his sons while taking a long gulp of his still, steaming green tea. Though he was happy to observe the current situation, he had also noticed something strange about Izuna's behavior. He wondered how this situation with his brother would be handled by the new clan head. Madara read his scrolls slowly, and the moment was dominated by silence. He slowly went over each document, hardly focusing on the words he was holding. After considering the situation in his mind, he made the decision to end the silence that was engulfing them. As he moved the scroll he was holding, Madara began, "That woman seems to be doing well." Izuna tensed up a little, then made himself loosen up again. The infirmary reports state that she's miraculously healed what they had deemed hopeless cases. For each patient listed in here, all their efforts were for nothing, but once she took control they were not only stabilized but well on their way to recovery, Madara explained casually, almost as if he were just talking out loud to himself. Madara pursed his lips after noticing the slight movement in his peripheral vision. As Madara observed him from the side, Izuna kept flinching and trying to hide his reactions. He even tried to smile, but after Madara stopped reporting, he paused and looked at the ground instead. Izuna woke up in alarm as Tajima said, "We still don't have any information about her origins," with a hint of frustration. Izuna said, "Father, she is a civilian from Matsumoto village, right away," his voice a little urgent. Setting his scroll aside, Madara turned to face his brother. Izuna straightened and made an effort to keep her eyes fixed on Madara despite her slight unease. Then, recalling how she escaped their compound without being caught, Madara quickly rattled off, "Do you know who her parents are, how she was trained in Airyo Jutsu or anything about her shinobi training?" Instead of the typical water or dirt, he wondered, and what kind of clone did she use? As it vanished into nothingness, leaving no trace. Izuna looked away from Madara and shifted his gaze slightly to the tatami floor. Izuna quietly presented his findings, his voice tinged with reluctance and uneasiness. "Based on my research, she became the healer of her village after curing them from illness. She is an orphan, the sole survivor of Nagano's village. As for her training, as I've told you before, I heard rumors that she was self-taught." Tajima muttered, "Nagano's village? I've come across that place before, trying to remember the little community close to the same named mountain. Izuna, currently you seem to be on the best terms with her, so I am going to assign you to get more information about her. Since her original village no longer exists, we can't verify if she was actually a part of it or if she is using it as a convenient background story. Infiltrators are tricky bastards after all," Madara ordered as he gazed at his brother as his eyes lit up with rage. Izuna froze for a second. He didn't show any signs of emotion by maintaining an expressionless face. He began cautiously, "I don't think that she is a spy," saying, "After all she bound herself with that seal to you, no?" Madara continued to look at his brother before shifting his attention to the seal on his wrist. Before lowering his hand slowly to his side, he balled his fingers into a fist. "HN," he complained, recalling when he had it applied. Flashback begin. A guard called Madara into the room, and he went into his father's quarters. He bowed briefly to his father, then stood facing him, his brow raised, and he looked at the back of their soon-to-be healer's head, a question written clearly on his face. He said in a neutral voice, "Shichiyu, you called for me." Madara bit out, "And why is she here?" before turning back to face his father and waiting for his response. After giving his son a nod, Tajima gestured for him to approach him. Tajima began, "You will be the clan leader starting tomorrow." Madara straightened slightly, displaying a subtle display of pride. "Manatsu-san has agreed to be our healer but only if we agree to a few conditions," Tajima said, grinning at his son and pointing to the blonde girl who was sitting quietly in front of him. "Oh," was Madara's casual response as he sat in front of the unusually silent woman and to his father's right. Under the lantern's gentle glow, He gazed at the blonde woman's calm face. Her composed yet polished expression captivated him, but he didn't give a damn about how attractive she looked. Madara looked back unflinchingly, but she kept staring down the woman. Throughout her interactions with us, she has always acted as if she didn't give a damn about us. She acted freely, as if she were untouchable, without hesitation or fear of repercussions. She just dismissed my actions and healed my father on her own terms, even when I threatened her when we first met. I was even referred to as Pinky. I'm by her. Me. Uchiha Madara, the heir to the clan head. No? Madara pored over the memories until a soft, flowing voice interrupted him, biting his ear and demanding his attention. In a delicate yet confident manner, Naruto said, Uchiha Madara, I agree to become your clan's healer under 2 conditions. The first is that you provide protection to Matsumoto village since your clan was unable to keep my identity secret due to your compound being compromised by an enemy spy. The jab at the security of his clan made him twitch his eye, but he forced himself not to. Given that their conflict with the Senju was an unending one, Madara grinned in her head as soon as she said, the second condition is that I will be under your care until the war between you and the Senju ends. Such a stipulation was essentially a commitment to work under him forever, so she might as well just promise him the rest of her life. Defense for her community. Safeguarding that location would be easy. Why shouldn't it be? In fact, to keep that village safe from bandits, I could send out some of the younger boys who are still undergoing training. In the field, they would receive low-risk training that would help them get ready for their real missions. Madara sat up a little straighter and said, I agree to these terms, your conditions are reasonable enough. Let us now discuss what your work will entail. You will heal our men during our battles, when in the compound, you will heal the wounded in the infirmary, you'll treat the civilians of my clan when they are in need of care, you'll train our Iryo.nin squad in the general areas that they are currently lacking, you will take 3 apprentices to ensure that your knowledge is passed down to the next generation, and of course, you will live here in our compound until you are no longer needed. Madara laughed as he listed all of his demands. At what he said, Naruto squinted. I won't take any apprentices, Madara-san. My knowledge will be kept with me. I can train your men in general practices, and that is asking a lot as it is. And as I've already pointed out to you, I can't live within the compound as I still have duty to my village, unless you will allow me regular visits to check on their well-being and drop off anything else they may require in my absence, and freedom to leave here and go to them in times of emergency. Naruto responded with hostility as she tightened her hands. I will allow you to go to them, I can agree to that. But why won't you take an apprentice to pass your knowledge to the next generation? It is not like you have secret clan jutsu or you have promised to keep them to yourself, seeing that you are self-thought, Madara said with a sincere response. When it was her turn to raise an eyebrow, Naruto pointed out, who said that I was self-thought? Madara tensed a little at her flow up, but he quickly covered it up before continuing. Prior to healing his father's wound, Izuna informed him that she was self-taught based on his research. He asked casually, are you not? In an attempt to elicit more information. Naruto glared at the man, challenging him to press her on the matter any further. You can say that. My reasons to not take a student are my own. It is non-negotiable, Naruto said. At that, Madara clenched his teeth. He desired to have her take care of some of his relatives. So, if she passed away, someone would at least know more than the Iryo.nin they currently use. Taking a student, even one of the ones that's already trained, would take time that you and I don't have. Beyond that, it is rather insulting for anyone to be forced to pass on their knowledge which they gained with great effort against their will, and furthermore it simply baffles me that you would assume that I'd be willing to do so not once but 3 times. Be happy that I'm complying with your request to train your Iryo.nin as it is. Especially since I don't even want to stay here, let alone be dragged into your little war with the Senju. Naruto began to scream while icy eyes of Uchiha Madara turned and snapped his neck, saying, fair enough, we will accept those conditions, Manatsu-san. His face was filled with shock as he looked at his father inquisitively. Tajima observed his son's expression and proceeded to explain his words. You are not tactful enough to deal with a woman, son. Would you like it if the Senju clan imprisoned you and then forced you to pass on your knowledge to their men? Madara had the grace to look away without emotion, uttering a distinct HN. That, to us ordinary people, was the closest he would get to displaying shame. Madara reluctantly said, I will prepare the contract then, and as he was ready to get up to go, he stopped abruptly. That won't be necessary, Naruto said confidently, and Madara gave her a wary look before turning back to sit again. In front of the Uchiha pair, she pulled a scroll out of her sleeve and unfolded it. As Madara gazed at the ceiling complex inscribed on the scroll's surface, His eyes grew wide. He had no idea what the seals were, and he couldn't even tell the start of the seal chain from the finish. Naruto sat up straighter and looked at the faces of the two Uchiha who were looking at her with interest and at the scroll that had opened in front of them. This is a bond seal. It bonds two individuals to a contract that they've mutually agreed upon. If either side tries to cheat or betray the other, the person at fault will face severe consequences, she said. Consequences? Tajima asked aloud, his voice tinged with concern. Naruto nodded her head and continued her explanation. If either party does anything explicitly against the constraints stated in the contract, then they will first experience a pain similar to that of being burned alive, followed by gradual paralysis that will spread the longer the action that triggered the seal goes uncorrected. Failure to correct the trigger transgression will lead to death. The paralysis will start in the toes and creep up the body until the betrayer is a quadriplegic, and finally it will spread inward and shut down the internal organs until the betrayer is dead. This may seem more of a risk for you than me, but you have the advantage of not having to question my loyalties while I'm bound to this seal. Naruto elaborated while Tajima and Madara listened intently. Inquiring, how would this guarantee your loyalty? Madara asked out of curiosity. The seal binds me as an Irio.nin, which will guarantee that I only heal your men and not harm them in any way, whether that harm be immediate or delayed. It will also guarantee that what I do teach your Irio.nin, I teach correctly as a guard against sabotage. And further, it would bar me from running away. I originally wanted this seal contract with you, Tajima. Dono, but now that Madara will be fulfilling his birthright, I will have to share this seal with him in your stead. Naruto went on to explain. Tajima questioned hesitantly, is this contract truly needed? How can we assure that it won't do anything other than what you said? He was aware that shinobi frequently break their contracts when circumstances allow and it serves their interests, and he knew that his son was also subject to these conditions. To answer your first question, yes, I don't go back on my word, Tajima, Dono. But I don't trust that your son won't. He, being the clan head, will make sure that my conditions are met, and as will his. Lastly, we use this seal or no deal. Both he and I will have the same seal, so both him and I will face the same consequences. I can't guarantee anything else to you because you, as it seems, don't have any knowledge about seals, so you literally only have the option of taking my word on this. You may have doubt. It is a risk, that I can assure you. But in instances like these you have to decide if the benefits are worth the gamble? The seal or no deal. After giving it some thought, Madara mulled over the possibility of using the seal. As she said, it would keep her in check, but he didn't want to be tied up. This seal would have to remain unknown. He wouldn't tell anyone that this woman had such influence over his behavior. Madara thought angrily, I am Uchiha Madara, and no one shall leash me. But after this, what else needs to be done? He tried to think of another way to get around that abandoned seal. He sighed inwardly, realizing there was no other way out of this, and grudgingly consented. Flashback finish. Madara shook his head in an attempt to block out the agony of the sealing. He was more shocked that the girl didn't scream during the sealing than he was that it was a little bit. He shuddered a little as he recalled the excruciating pain the seal caused as it ran through his veins and stuck to his body, thinking, she must have an enormous pain tolerance. You have a point there, Izuna, but even so there might be a way around our contract. She can pass information about our clan to others. Seeing as she wouldn't agree to be loyal to us beyond her duties as a healer and teacher through the seal, which is something that I couldn't convince her to do, Madara grumbled as he wrapped his sleeves. With a weary sigh, Izuna reluctantly nodded his head. Madara turned to face his father, who was still gazing at the shoji screen, after leaving the room. Tajima turned to Madara, who nodded in agreement, and said, watch out for Izuna. It looks like something happened between him and our young healer. Madara practically hissed as he gripped the seal. Streaked wrist with his left hand. I have complete faith that he is loyal to our clan. But we have to be careful when it comes to his reluctance when it comes to that wretched woman. Determinedly, the young clan chief turned back to his papers. He would have to protect his brother from that cunning woman. As soon as he laid eyes on her, he knew she was trouble. Skills be damned, he would kill her if she betrayed him. Every element of the lives of Uchiha men were governed by a code. It was literally what defined Uchiha as such, apart from the blood that pumped through their veins. The clan head's orders must be obeyed without question by all Uchiha. Every Uchiha member is required to support the clan in any way they can. Every Uchiha is expected to act in a manner worthy of people with our kind of blood. Everyone must walk with a straight, appropriate stance that conveys strength and dignity. Light steps and graceful motions are ideal. All actions should embody our clan's ancestral rights above all else. The ways of those descended from the great sage of six paths are less savage. Throughout his life, Izuna had effortlessly adhered to the code. His accomplishments only served to elevate the Uchiha name and never to bring disgrace to his clan. He constantly worked to hone his abilities, took good care of his family, and ensured that his clan succeeded in all of its undertakings. He never offended his father, he always obeyed the clan chief's commands with honor and without hesitation, and he always made sure to give his brother all the support he could muster. He embodied the ideal Uchiha. However, as he stood outside the clinic where the blonde enigma who constantly invaded his thoughts worked, his perfection was all but forgotten at that moment. Izuna moaned in his head, "This isn't fair," as he stood motionless in the threshold. "I have never given in on anything. Why am I standing here in this position? She must be able to sense my anxiety radiating from over there." Izuna scolded himself as he sighed softly and turned to go, but his brother's commands kept repeating in his head, stopping him. "It is my responsibility to look into Manatsu. Even though I truly don't want to, especially since myself. Serving request has tied her to our clan. Since we spoke in that field, she has not acknowledged me or even spoken. And why would she?" Izuna thought loathingly, "I'm the reason she's now bound to the clan that is responsible for the loss of her family and friends. She definitely despises me," he added glumly, his fingers twitching a little with the hem of his yukata as he spoke. Knowing how much she despises him, how could he approach her? "No, I'm a Uchiha, and don't be hesitant, Uchiha," with resolve, he told himself as he entered the clinic. Even though most, if not all, of them concealed their feelings behind a facade of cool indifference, he would make amends with Manatsu, show her how sorry he was for his request, and demonstrate to her how ideal and vibrant his clan was. In contrast to the enormous number of patients following their most recent battle, he observed that the clinic had relatively few patients. The rooms were packed with neatly arranged beds and supplies, and the place was remarkably clean. He had never seen the clinic so organized. With pride in his blonde friends, or ex-friends, skills, Izuna thought, no wonder Madara and Inoue praised her in today's meeting. He needed to know exactly where they were now standing badly because he was no longer so sure. He wasn't anticipating the response, if recent encounters, or lack thereof, were any indication. Izuna strode to the room at the back of the clinic where Manatsu had been giving the doctor's instructions. He watched through the slightly open shoji screen as Manatsu gave the Uchiha medical team instructions on how to manipulate their chakra's flow, seemingly using the same method she employed to heal his father. Everyone in the group was having trouble with the technique, but after she gave a few pointers and went around the room fixing individual errors, there was a discernible improvement. Abruptly, blue eyes shifted toward the door and met startled obsidian eyes. Izuna blushed in shame at being seen staring at her and jumped a step back. As he heard her call for a break and suspend the class, he straightened his posture. When the shoji screen appeared, the Uchiha men recognized Izuna and stopped in shock before bowing respectfully and moving on. After taking his time and calming down, Izuna cleared his throat and entered the room, where he discovered Manatsu gathering a few objects from her lesson. He approached her and began to assist her while he attempted to think of a way to engage her in conversation. Izuna's mind was racing with ideas, and his body was functioning automatically, until he sensed a softness he couldn't place. He glanced at his hand and noticed that it was delicately encircling another's hand. Warmth rushed through his palm and swiftly followed up his arm due to the soft, supple skin. Until he became aware that he was holding a hand, Izuna was totally absorbed in the moment. He slowly lifted his head until he was frozen in place. Staring into his face were piercing azure orbs that were completely unreadable and immobile. Izuna noticed that the warmth that had once been present in those blue gems was eerily missing during a prolonged period of silence that seemed to last forever but was actually only a few seconds. Nothing was reflected in the woman's faraway gaze. Izuna couldn't quite place the reason why the sight of those eyes shook him, but the woman's voice immediately broke the pattern of thought. "Thank you, Uchiha-san." The way Izuna spoke to him made her chest tighten. Izuna stood up and grabbed her wrist, stopping her as she turned to go. He called out, "Manatsu-san," in a low voice, as though her name were stuck in his throat. She was unable to leave because his hand was still on her wrist. He thought for a moment before saying, "I'm sorry, I know I wasn't being fair with you," because he was truly at a loss for words to express how he felt. Izuna had a reputation, and everyone in the clan knew a few things about him. He was always in control of his emotions, and the only emotion he was known to display was love for his family, and only then, and only outside of training and combat. Since the Senju took his brothers away from him, he harbored a strong hatred for them. These two factors were undeniable and tangible, but ever since that day in that field, he had been wondering if he had been missing something. In some way, his clan's beliefs were incorrect. The idea left him feeling bitter, and a sense of dread had been circulating inside of him, festering and intensifying over the course of the days. Before, he had never questioned his way of life. Even though he was aware that his beliefs shouldn't be questioned, Manatsu's remarks rocked them to their core. He simply had no idea how to handle this circumstance. She said softly, not daring to look into her eyes, "I don't know what to say. I'm sorry for your loss and I really don't want you to hate me." The whole thing was so unlike Uchiha. For the first time in his life, he was experiencing such misery. With a sigh, Manatsu said, "Izuna-san," quietly. The speed at which Izuna raised his head to gaze at the blonde girl's smile caused his neck to click. She asked, assuming the man in front of her had good intentions, "Would you like to have lunch with me?" Naruto had a difficult 2 weeks because he had to manage the clinic, care for patients who refused to be healed by a woman, organize the paperwork, and set up a system for documentation and records. But after demonstrating her ability to heal some patients, particularly those who were thought to be as good as dead, she was able to do so. Even though it was grudging, it was sufficient to earn some respect. For the time being, however, it was sufficient to have her commands obeyed, even if they were accompanied by the holier-than-thou mentality that was characteristic of the entire Uchiha clan. It was unexpected for Naruto to see Izuna, much less hear his heartfelt apology. He made her think of Inari's pathetically dejected face. Her determination to continue the silent treatment was shattered by his dejected expression. Oh well, she invited him to lunch because, as she always said, a nice, warm bowl of ramen always made everything better. As they ate their lunches, she felt calm as she spoke to him about everything and nothing. As he watched 20 bowls of ramen emerge from her storage scroll, Izuna gave her a startled and amazed look. He also looked somewhat disgusted but fascinated when 19 of them vanished in a matter of seconds, while he was still having trouble finishing his one medium-sized bowl of miso ramen. She dismissed it because she was accustomed to seeing those looks when she first ate ramen in front of strangers. And then Satoshi was shocked that every single article of clothing he had given me had changed to my usual attire colors, although he made sure to bring me black kimonos to wear every day. I told him that I don't like black, but he insists that it is more presentable than my Miko attire. That idiot, orange is the most badass color in the world, Manatsu said when she noticed that Izuna was slightly smiling when she was ranting. This was equivalent to a full-fledged smile for Uchiha, so even after their blowout in the field, she was unable to support her decision to continue to befriend him. She enjoyed him because he wasn't your typical Uchiha. When Izuna said, "Manatsu-san, you are now a member of the clan. Wearing the clothes that Satoshi gives you will tell others that they have to think twice before they attack you," Naruto arched an eyebrow. She slurped her ramen broth and managed to ask, "How so?" "The clan symbol is stitched on the back of those clothes and," Izuna replied bluntly, keeping his chopsticks neatly by his bowl. She shrugged it off, knowing exactly what it meant to wear the Uchiha crest on her clothing. "Nay. Still I won't wear them. If I did wear them, it would tell others that I'm a part of the Uchiha clan while in truth I'm only contractually allied with you until the war with Senju is over. She was their property if she wore them, and she would be damned before she permitted such a thing." She saw Izuna wince at what she said, and she could still see him attempting to persuade her to reconsider. However, the impoverished man was unaware of Uzumaki Naruto's stubbornness. She was born with it. Who was she to disappoint her ancestors when so many generations of men had failed at this task? She was undoubtedly carrying on her mother's illustrious legacy of stubbornness. After they had finished their meal, Naruto smiled as she led Izuna to the infirmary's door. As he walked away, she waved to him, "I will see you later, Izuna-san," and he acknowledged her with a nod. Her smile vanished as soon as he was out of her line of sight, and her face became expressionless. She observed that the streets were deserted and that shadows were waiting for her to leave the clinic by hiding in the alleys and over the rooftops. Her eyes narrowed because her students hadn't returned yet. She muttered, "What are they planning now?" and closed the shoji screen behind her as she slowly made her way outside without indicating that she was aware of their presence. They attacked her as soon as she reached the center of the road. Shit, she thought, preventing a fist from making contact with her abdomen. She saw that her assailant was a young boy from Uchiha, perhaps 8 or 9 years old. His expressionless face made her think of root members, which disturbed her on a level she didn't want to confront at the time. Pulling the boy toward her, she threw him over her shoulder and into a waiting wall as she deftly jumped away from another young Uchiha. She then put a well-aimed knee to the boy's gut, forcing all the air out of his lungs. Is today the day of the healer? As another armored Uchiha child attempted a sneak attack, Naruto pondered sarcastically and angrily. He blew a medium-sized ball of fire toward her while yelling its name, Kaden. Gokakyu no Jutsu, Fire Release. Great Fireball Jutsu. And he broke through the hand seals of the Uchiha's signature attack. On one of the houses, Naruto rolled her eyes, leapt back, and stuck her legs over a wall. With a smirk on her face, she then used the momentum from her jump to fly over the fireball with grace. Well, it had been a dull couple of weeks. I might as well knock around a few Uchiha to release some of this pent-up energy. On one of the roofs, Madara was standing, with the Uchiha Council standing just behind him. One of the elders sneered and the others complained in agreement, saying, "It is a disgrace that they are all failing to land at least one hit on her. She hasn't even used any ninjutsu against them and yet they are being effortlessly swept to the side like trash." Another man grumbled. Madara ignored their petty grievances as he concentrated on the movements of the young healers. They were elegant as she dodged every blow. Instead of his warriors being kunai, she was making them appear to be wet behind the ears kids with sticks. When the first 3 or 4 men attacked, she was frowning, but then, as if a switch had been flipped, a savage and wild smile spread across her face. She was clearly enjoying the fight, as anyone who was truly listening could see. She just dismissed it as if it had never existed, despite the fact that his men were blazing with murderous intent. "You really are a curious little thing," Madara thought as he turned to face his father and met his gaze. His father remained quietly by his side, observing her movements and those of their relatives. Before the mock battle began, they brought Izuna to stand next to them, and they both noticed how he was looking at her anxiously. But as soon as he realized she was winning the fight, the tension left him, and he smiled. It wasn't just any smile, though, it was a proud one, and Madara was furious. Izuna was supposed to be furious as he saw his family members succumb completely to that miserable woman's pity. Yet here he was, essentially applauding her. Madara could swear that his brother would be jumping and yelling for her to defeat them, just like he used to do when Madara was training in his younger days, if it weren't for the purpose of maintaining his expressionless mask. As he gazed at his brother's joyful face, something inside of him was burning in his veins because of. This woman is inferior. And after the last of his men had fallen, he attacked her because of something. She scowled at him in blatant defiance after he saw the shock on her face, which he rather liked. They exchanged multiple hits while dancing around one another. They all hit, blocked, and countered with a stunning skill that most people could never hope to possess. Madara became enraged when he realized how easily she was matching him. Hashirama was the only person who could ever hope to equal his power. And he would fall before this woman. He must have fallen before her. Until she was lying at his feet, he would not be content. And she did. Before aiming a kunai at her neck, Madara was able to knock her to her back. Instead of looking at him fearfully, though, she dared to meet his eyes. He could not imagine such egregious disrespect. Why would she simply obey her superiors? "I'm going to break her will." Madara smirked as he straightened in front of her, thinking, "I won't be satisfied until she is nothing but the submissive obedient woman that she was born to be." She actually snarled as she stood in front of him, asking, "What is the big idea, Uchiha?" His azure eyes twisted in rage, giving his smirk an overwhelming sense of superiority, and then he completely ignored her and turned away from her. Madara took 3 steps before he could hear the arrogant tone of her voice. "Next week we will engage in a battle with the Kagaya clan. I just wanted to see if you could keep up in a fight, which thankfully for your sake you can, as we've all witnessed your pathetic display of power. But don't worry, I will provide guards to keep you safe while you heal my men." Looking around at the numerous fallen Uchiha around her, Manatsu asked sarcastically, "Would you be so kind as to enlighten me, oh so mighty Pinky? Chan, how will you fight with half of your men injured?" Madara came to a halt and fixed her with his black eyes. "You will heal them, woman. It will be a test of your ability." Madara's eyelid twitched, and she grinned. "I will do no such thing. Test or not. Just because you decide to throw your men at me for some stupid test of my ability without a thought to the consequences, doesn't mean that I will heal them just because you command it. At least this will teach you to think of your men's health before ordering them, you snotty arrogant bastard." As she turned to go, Manatsu hissed in contempt before she stopped in her tracks. Madara's seal tingled, alerting him to the activation of the leash around her neck. Her tense jaw told him that she was in pain, and he relished every moment of it. He approached her slowly and positioned himself to her right. He leaned his mouth toward her ear and said, "If I were you, I would hold up my end of the deal, woman. Now chop, chop. My men have preparations to attend to, so it would be best if he hurried along." His tone was tinged with mock laughter. Madara was aware that he could alleviate her suffering, but he chose not to. It would likely take the remainder of the day to finish the task, but once she had healed the last of his men and seen the sheer number of his fallen men, her pain would cease on its own. He had been upset a moment ago as he saw his men surrender to her authority, but he was now pleased with the outcome. If she didn't want to experience pain, she could heal his men and defend herself during their conflicts. He wanted her to know where she belonged, and she would. He grinned again at the sight in front of him. Madara smiled as he walked into his room, and his brother held the shoji screen as he was ready to shut the door. After shutting the door behind him, Izuna rushed inside the room and asked, "Inoue, why did you attack Manatsu-chan?" "Chan," Madara thought, frowning as he saw the rage barely hidden in his Ododo's eyes. As he strode into the room, Madara calmly replied, "I wanted to test whether or not she could hold her ground against warriors of my caliber." He then turned to face his brother's ambivalent expression. He asked, "Izuna, why are you upset?" and saw his brother wince a little. "I was just upset that you planned to attack Manatsu-chan without telling me. The whole clan knew and your younger brother knew nothing about it." Madara watched his brother closely and squinted his eyes. He was being transformed by that woman. With barely disguised rage, Madara thought, "We had discussed the attack during today's meeting and he wasn't paying any attention." Madara murmured, "HN," as he walked around his brother, who was standing composedly in front of him. Madara said casually, "It will do that woman well if she wears our clothes from now. Make sure to inform her of that." His brother immediately nodded. Izuna responded, "I told her to do so, and Inoue and I will make sure that she will," and Madara gave a nod of agreement. With a bow, Izuna said, "Leave me be now," and walked away. Madara watched his brother leave his room as he turned around. A sensation washed over him that he was unable to describe. A sensation he had never experienced before. Not rage, but something else.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.